Dave Locken with Awesemo.com here with another video for you. And today we're talking second-year receivers. Last year, rookie season for receivers was absolutely insane. From top to bottom, it felt like every single receiver drafted in 2020 went off. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case. And a lot of them who did have good rookie seasons could have been so much better had their progress not been derailed for one reason or another. We're going to talk about all of them, and I got a handful of guys today that I think are going to absolutely explode in their second year heading into 2021. So let's dive straight into this without further ado. But before we do, so I guess this is further ado, before we do, if you like these videos, you appreciate all this content here, and you think maybe along the way we've helped you out at Awesemo Fantasy Football Channel, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, help us get the 6K subs, and let's dive into it. Henry Ruggs may not have been a player you expected to see on this list, but I think there are more than just a couple of reasons to be excited about him going into year two. Ruggs is being drafted as the wide receiver 56 on Underdog Fantasy, which means we're hardly committing much draft capital to begin with. But it's what he can bring to the table as a sophomore receiver that gets my attention. Ruggs put on 13 pounds in the offseason, which he doesn't believe will affect his speed. He said it was mostly to improve as a blocker, but I don't think putting on some LBs is going to hurt him becoming a more physical receiver in contested balls. He already created good enough separation as a rookie, led all first-year receivers in yards per reception, and should absolutely be used a lot more in 2021. Look at it this way. The Raiders drafted Ruggs 12th overall, ahead of Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, and Justin Jefferson. Crazy, I know. But still, as the first receiver off the board just 1 year back, it would be an egregious misuse of first-round draft capital to not expand his role significantly in year two, even though the Raiders have been known to egregiously misuse draft capital in the first round. And the Raiders' offense isn't bad either. They finished top 10 in scoring last year, while Darren Waller posted the 7th most PPR points of any pass catcher, and the since-departed Nelson Agholor enjoyed his best season as a pro, with 896 yards and 8 touchdowns on 48 receptions. Derek Carr was solid too, with a top 10 adjusted completion percentage and the 6th highest yards per attempt. Still, Ruggs will have to put the pieces together on his own, and hopefully his insane speed and athleticism will be more than enough to get him involved not just as a deep threat, only 3 quarterbacks created more yards on deep balls than Carr last year, by the way, but also as a receiver who can create big yards after the catch on opportunities closer to the line of scrimmage. And John Gruden has already said he wants to get Ruggs involved as a lot more than just a deep threat this season. Ultimately, we're spending a double-digit round pick on the first receiver off the board in 2020. His disappointing 10% target.
Let's do a show, baby. Let's do it. Yeah! Emerald Tom Brady. What's going on, everybody? Hello. How we doing? Oh, dude, what a sweat that was. Ended up just jumping to the front of the line. Who cares about baseball? Okay, I care about baseball. It's the MLB Deeper Dive Show, presented here by Awesemo, presented by our sponsor, Jock Market. I'm Eric Lindquist. I might have just gotten an NFT. That was nice. $50. I don't know what I just spent $50 on, but I know that it's got to be pretty good. Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS. He's the guy you really want to be listening to, not my obnoxious ass. But Adam, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty good. Didn't get that Tom Brady NFT. Forgot about the first two drops. Bought a few on the marketplace. Yeah, it's fun. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so which ones did you buy?
I just bought three of the original, the very first one.
And did you buy them? So I saw $90 was kind of the price point that they were going for that.
Oh, I bought them all for $145.
Oh, look at
and
you.
now they're going for $175.
So you're just automatic $90 ROI, call it a day, or are you gonna hold on?
I mean, I'm holding for a little bit. I listed a couple to where I would break even, but there's also like a 15% fee on sales. So yeah, I don't know. Like it's $450. So if I end up just getting stuck with them, I don't really care. Maybe they'll be worth something, in a while. But if I can, make a quick profit on a couple, why not?
So this is now the NFT corner, the NFT deeper dive. Is there anything else that I need to be looking at on the NFT market now that I'm absolutely riding a high and I'm already caffeinated? So you guys are in a load of trouble.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting into it now too, like because it's like overwhelming because there's so much shit and I don't know what I'm looking at. But Lofty and Ben have been like helping me along and getting me to look at stuff. So I don't know. I bought 2 Gronk NFTs yesterday. Those went up like 4x overnight. So that was nice.
Ben's trying to get me to buy this wizard thing. I need to start getting into wizards.
I'm looking at those right now. Ben's been pushing that on me also.
They just look like Ewoks.
I just don't trust Ben because I sold him a Top Shot for like $5,000 that he's taken an absolute bath on. So I feel like he might just be trying to get me to give money back.
What a jerk, but also what a great human being, Ben Raza. You can catch us tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, 4:30 Pacific. We're going to be doing the PGA Live Before Lock for the Wyndham Championship. So definitely be checking that out. We've got all the, yes, wait for it, goodies in store for you. So if you're playing the Eric Lindquist drinking game, goodies, there it was right off the bat. There it was twice. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell as you're coming on in here. We're going to break down 11 games, but good thing we talk very, very fast. I don't think we'll have any issue getting through 11 games here on this slate, but Lewis Brinson's second home run, is that good or bad for you?
Oh, absolutely awful.
Oh, great. That's fantastic. Let's start the show. You ready to ride, my dude?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess we should also say we're going to talk about Jock Market here a little bit later, but I also want to bring up Betting You, Reed, because, of course, we've got Ben Rasa. I'm going to be on that PGA show with him, and I want to give him a plug for his new podcast, Betting You. And that's the other sponsor that we have going for pretty much every show we're doing here right now. If you want to know all of the college football insights, we are going to be there in less than 3 weeks, 4 weeks here. I mean, it's starting before NFL for sure. You've got important college football games starting, of course, with that Clemson-Georgia game, which I cannot wait for. Excited for that because I think Georgia looks like a great bet around the industry, getting the over on their wins total. And if you want to know things like that, check out the Betting You podcast with Matt Gajewski, another just insanely sharp dude, and Ben Rasa. They talk all things college betting. Check out the episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But otherwise, let's get to our baseball. First game on the bat, St. Louis -163 at Pittsburgh, 9 total runs here in this one. Pittsburgh's terrible at baseball. Will Crow exists. Will Crow. I love saying that because it takes me back to Game of Thrones days. But Adam Wainwright's really the guy to talk about. You and I have both been shocked by how good he's been. And now you're getting this Pittsburgh team with Hoy Park. Hello. He's at the top at 2K. I don't know why his price never changes, but otherwise, I just don't have a ton of interest outside of him and Brian Hayes on the other side for Pittsburgh. Adam Wainwright, what are we doing with him today at 9.4K on DK?
Yeah, I think Wainwright's priced about where he should be. The way I put it this morning on the show with Josh was 9,400. There's like a little bit of sticker shock with Wainwright because his strikeout percentage isn't that great for that salary. But at the same time, if you imagine Wainwright's like 8,500 or 8,600, people would just be flocking to play him against the Pirates. So I think he's priced about where he should be. He's projected for about 13% ownership. That's about where I think he should be. Doesn't really seem like there's a big edge one way or the other. I'll probably get somewhere around the field on Wainwright. It's a good matchup. The Pirates have strikeouts in their lineup. They're a below average lineup overall. Wainwright about an average strikeout percentage at 22.8%, but 3.77 xFIP is good. Only a 6.5% walk percentage this year. He's just a pretty good pitcher in a good spot at probably the correct price.
Yeah, that's probably the right way of putting it. If you couldn't tell, I'm trying to post this right now. I'm trying to immediately see what this is going for, and I keep refreshing, and I can't figure it out. I should probably, work. 469 is the number.
448. It's going for like 450.
Hang on. Can I sell this to you live while we're doing this? Is this something that's appropriate? Is this work appropriate? I have number 181. What's the number you pay for number 181?
What'd you say?
How much do you want for number 181? You name the number above 500 and I'll give it to you.
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
You don't want it?
I do not want it.
Okay. Well, I just gave you the opportunity of a lifetime, but I digress. It's a Tom Brady Emerald. I don't know what the hell that means, but yay for me. Yay for me. Let's go on over to the other side of here. Pittsburgh. Oh, Will Crow. That's just how you say his name. I'm not interested in playing him. How about you?
No, me neither. It's the only, if you wanted to make a case for Will Crow, it would be that the Cardinals are going to deservedly get a lot of ownership because they're so cheap, but that's not really a strong enough case for me to be getting there. Just not a very good pitcher at this point. He has about a 20% strikeout percentage for the year, but 4.88 xFIP, 10.4% walk percentage is high. The big thing though, 2.16 home runs per 9. He's given up a lot of power this year. And in particular, he's given up a lot of power to right-handed hitters, which is a bit of a problem when you're going up against this Cardinals team that has essentially nothing but right-handed hitters. 393 expected WOBA to righties, 259 expected ISO to right-handed hitters. And you have Dylan Carlson leading off. You have Tommy Edman batting 8th. Everybody else is right-handed in this lineup. So pretty tough sell getting to Will Crow, I think.
There are 9 of them. So you sure you don't? $500 for number 168. That seems like a deal here right now, but whatever.
Did you sell it?
No, I'm going to post it. I have to learn all this crap while I'm on live stream, while I'm working here. So it's not exactly the ideal time to be doing this. I'm sure Jordan Klein's going to give me a lot of these looks coming up here in the next hour or so. Be like, oh man, get back to the baseball. But let's talk baseball. Let's talk Cardinals specifically here. This is a team that I think really stands out to me. I like getting to them here on this slate. It's strange looking at this top stacks tool today because St. Louis, I mean, they're coming in with a crazy amount of ownership over on DK, probably the most over-owned team. Yep, they absolutely are. And I think that makes some sense. Much more interested on FanDuel, where I've been playing a lot more of late. That's what I had pulled up when I was thinking that they were flat. DK, that's scary looking at that ownership. How do you handle that?
The Cardinals ownership?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty tough because I think they're in a really good spot, but at the same time, they're projected to be the highest owned team on the slate. It's an 11-game slate. So, I mean, there's just so many other places you can go and get a similar range of outcomes, even if they don't project quite as well. So, individually, I like a lot of these guys. Tyler O'Neill at 3,200 on DraftKings really stands out. He was a late scratch yesterday, but he's back in the lineup tonight. He's got a 31% strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching in his career, but also an ISO above 200, and Will Crow just doesn't strike out a lot of guys. So I think it sets up really nicely for him. Harrison Bader, Dylan Carlson, both very good values as well. Yachty's a good value at catcher. And then you have to pay up a little bit, but not even that much for guys like Goldschmidt and Arenado. So I think the Cardinals are guys you're going to get to a lot in cash games. They look like excellent values. The problem just comes in tournaments with the ownership that they're getting. Typically with a team like this, I'm more likely to just be mixing those guys in with lower owned pitching, lower owned stacks than I am jamming 5 of them into a lineup together. The reason just being that once you go to 5 of these guys, like every hitter on the Cardinals on DraftKings is projected for between 10.5% and 28% ownership. All 3 outfielders getting 20+%, Arenado at 19%, Goldschmidt at 14. It's just really hard if you take 5 of those guys and that, accounts for half of your lineup. It's really difficult to then be different and not be, competing with a large part of the field, because the way you need to think about it is whatever team you stack, you're hoping that they're the top scoring team or one of the top scoring teams. And so if you're stacking 5 Cardinals, you're saying, okay, I just need this whole team to go off. If that happens, you're still competing with a ton of people that are in the same boat as you. Whereas if you go with a lower owned team, you can still grab someone like O'Neill or Carlson or Arenado, whoever. But under that scenario, you're saying, I hope this other lower owned team has a really big game. I hope the Cardinals as a team do not, but this 1 or 2 individual guys do. That's still a viable path, and it's going to put you in a situation where you don't have quite as much competition if it happens.
I think that that's the right way of looking at it. And on the Pittsburgh side, Brian Reynolds, I think we bring up every single slate as somebody who's viable there. Hoy Park in the leadoff spot, been playing him in cash where he was shortstop eligible here the other day. That worked out really nicely yesterday. Not that he's a great hitter by any means, even in this very limited sample we have on him. 198 expected batting average. That is horse crap, and we don't like that. Pittsburgh, what are we doing with them on this slate?
So I think the Pirates, I don't really like them as a full stack. They're the third lowest top stack percentage. They're getting like 2% ownership, which is actually a little bit high. But I do think that they are one of the teams that you can look at, and just from a range of outcome standpoint, you can see how there's some pivots to the Cardinals. For example, Tyler O'Neill and all the outfielders in that 3K range are getting a lot of ownership. Brian Reynolds, a little more expensive at 3,600. He's a legitimately good hitter. The matchup isn't nearly as good against Wainwright, but there's enough volatility in baseball that if you're going to get, like a 3% owned Brian Reynolds or a 28% owned O'Neill, there's definitely reasons to just look to Reynolds. You can make the same case for Ke'Bryan Hayes at 3,600. Like you said, Park's not any good, but he's 2K and leading off. Colin Moran's 2,900. So I don't mind using Pittsburgh value just as low-owned guys who, the matchup against Wainwright isn't great. There's going to be a lot of better spots to look to on the slate. But if you do need value and it happens to be a lineup where you need some low-owned value, I think you can look to the Pirates.
Anything else from this game whatsoever?
Nope.
Okay. Going to the Dodgers, 5.4 implied runs here. David Price on the mound for them. Kyle Gibson on the other side, 4.7 implied runs for them. Pretty even matchup here. But I mean, the Dodgers, it's strange to see them only at minus 130. I would absolutely love that. David Price, not my favorite pitcher for sure. He's stretched out now, though. There's an opportunity for him to pitch a little bit deeper into some of these games. But slight favorites for the Dodgers, that's going to be rare. And I don't really believe in Kyle Gibson, and I don't think you do either. But talk to me about pitching here and their viability, because looking at the top pitchers tool, doesn't seem like either one are really jumping up in a meaningful way.
Yeah, neither one looks that great to me. I still have a hard time trusting how deep David Price is going to go into a game, because they've talked about stretching him out, but then they still kind of don't. Over his last 4 starts, he's thrown 66, 74, 64, and 62 pitches. He went 5 1/3 last time out, but it just kind of comes down to, could he have a reasonably good start at 6,600 against the Phillies here? He could, but I just don't have a lot of confidence that he's going too deep into this game. It's a favorable park for hitting. The Phillies have a pretty decent lineup. Andrew McCutchen's back. Rhys Hoskins is still out. But it's an okay lineup. If you're playing 150 lineups, you probably get to a little bit of Price, but I don't think he's anybody that I'm really building around heavily tonight.
I mean, Kyle Gibson, is there any kind of viability just at his ownership? It seems like he's just going completely unowned today. And we saw yesterday Aaron Nola just mowing down Dodgers. And I don't think that that's the norm. This isn't an offense we want to pick on whatsoever, probably going forward, but he is like under 1% owned. Can we make any kind of a case for Kyle Gibson?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't really see it because the strikeout numbers aren't there, and he's at an elevated price point now in a difficult matchup. He's gotten a bit lucky this year in several areas, but in terms of run prevention, but he hasn't been a good strikeout guy anyway. He's only struck out 19.9% of hitters this year. And then now you're getting this Dodgers team. It's just so difficult to envision a scenario where Gibson actually goes out there and has a big game here at, a big enough game at 8,800. It would be one thing if you were still at that $7K or $7,400 price point and low ownership, because then you could make, some case to just take a decent pitcher in Gibson. But I think there's enough relatively low owned pitchers on this slate that I actually like before I get to Gibson.
Well, and there's 3 massive upside pitchers at the top of the tool, and it's hard not to love all 3 of them. We'll get into them a little bit later. I think you can probably guess if you saw the strategy show exactly who we're going to be targeting there. But talking about bats here, I think there's viability to going to the Dodgers any slate whatsoever, especially on slates where they have an 8.4% top stack potential, which is second best on this slate, and they're going under own. This becomes one of my favorite teams to go to. Going to be hard to fit them with some of that expensive pitching that I'm kind of alluding to, but Dodgers, how are you treating them on this slate?
Yeah, I think the Dodgers look good because, like we were saying with Gibson, he's gotten pretty lucky in terms of run prevention this year. He doesn't strike guys out. He's done a good job of limiting power, and that is even reflected in his expected power numbers. Only a 0.01 expected ISO to right-handed hitters this year, 122 expected ISO to lefties. But this is a park that favors hitting. You're going to get some balls here that, maybe quote unquote shouldn't be home runs or doubles or whatever, but they are because they're in Philly. And this is just such a good Dodgers team. Like when you look at season long numbers like that, you have to keep in mind that that's against everybody that he has faced. It's not against very, very above average offenses like the Dodgers. And then most importantly, they're just not getting ownership because they're expensive, like you said. And while there is pitching to pay up for on this slate, there's also some pretty high upside arms that you can pay down for. One in particular on DraftKings, but a couple others that look pretty good as well. So I think that helps as far as getting to the Dodgers goes. And then also, Turner's 6,100, Muncy's 5,700 on DraftKings. Outside of that, Chris Taylor's the only hitter at 5,100 above 5K. So it's an expensive team, but it's not like this is one of those slates where like every hitter on the Dodgers is 6K or something.
And I'm in love with the Philadelphia side. I really am today. Getting McCutchen back in there, 3.4K makes it very doable. Alec Boehm, some of his StatCast stuff just surprises me every time that I look at it because the guy actually makes pretty hard contact, 51.4% hard hit percentage on the season in a large sample. I wish it were going in the air a little bit more, 5.5 degrees, but that's resulting in only a 400 expected slugging. If that ball though gets in the air whatsoever, the guy can definitely hit a couple more out there than what I was expecting when I was digging into him. But I like this Philly side. How about you?
Kind of middle of the road for me.
Okay.
I think it's an okay matchup against Price. What I do really like, though, is the salaries here because Philadelphia is not getting much ownership and they are still really inexpensive. For example, we've already talked about the Cardinals, who we can compare them to. The matchup for the Cardinals is clearly better than the matchup for the Phillies. But at the same time, you're only talking about like a half run difference in implied run total. It's a favorable hitter's park in Philly. Gene Segura is 3,800. That's a good price. JT Realmuto at 4,400 is one of the top catching plays on the slate. Harper is Harper, and he's a little cheaper than he normally is. McCutchen's really cheap. Boehm's really cheap. And then, Gregorius lefty, but he's also inexpensive. It's just a cheap team where the Cardinals, for example, are projected to get like 9 times the ownership that the Phillies are. To me, even though it's a better spot for the Cardinals, it's not that much of a better spot.
Exactly. It's like 1/7 of the ownership. If you're going 20% to 3%, for me, it's not that, I'm absolutely in love with this spot. I want to target David Price at every turn. David Price being a lot more improved from previous iterations of David Price the last couple of years, keeping the ball on the ground, limiting hard contact. K percentage is not up there, but limiting walks as well. I can get to a couple Phillies here in this spot for sure.
There are teams that I like more than the Phillies that are on their own that we'll get to, but again, just kind of comparing them to the Cardinals in the top stack tool, the Cardinals are twice as likely to be the top stack as Philadelphia. So it's easy to say you're like, oh, well, why wouldn't I just play the Cardinals? And again, they're getting 9 times the ownership, even though they're only twice as likely.
Anything else from this game?
No, pretty much just bats for me.
No, but just bats. Okay. Like that too. We have 2 new YouTube channels. Let's go into this and then we're going to just steamroll. We got 9 games to get through. We will do so, but 2 new YouTube channels that you need to be out. I've been bringing them up every single show that I've been on for the last couple weeks. The Awesemo Odds channel, the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, both are pinned to the YouTube chat. Give those a like, give them a subscribe. Check out some of the video content we have going for there. NFL is coming so soon. Week 1 will be here before you know it. Preseason is in full swing now. We'll have some coverage for Thursday tomorrow. I know Laffy and Makachevsky are going to be doing a show. Can't wait to tune into that. Poolside in Vegas. That'll be an exciting time to fire up some DK lineups. Looking forward to that. Enter my contest. I got to remind myself to do that tonight, get some head-to-heads posted, but looking forward to that because I tell you what, Makachevsky is as sharp as they get in the NFL streets. Talking with him, going through his projections, he's got a crazy good process. And if you want to be checking out some of his thoughts on the upcoming NFL season, check out those YouTube videos that he's got posted over at the Fantasy Football channel and the Odds channel. We've got bets coming out all the time for the various, whether it's NFL MVPs, Super Bowl favorites. We have videos coming back from the last couple of weeks. Laffy, myself, I know Josh will be getting in the mix over there quite a bit too. He's been doing the breakfast menu over on the Odds channel. Check that out with Ben Rasa as well. So much good stuff coming. So make sure you guys are subscribed to that. All right. Detroit -113 at Baltimore, 10 total runs. I think this is an important one to talk about because Detroit apparently cannot fail ever as chalk. It's just not a thing that happens. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but I'm just not going to be there again today outside of some Robbie Grossman one-offs. What do you think about today?
Yeah, I actually got to the Tigers some yesterday. It was kind of middle of the road, but now you're back to getting some ownership. It is mostly just going to 2 guys, though. Robbie Grossman at 3,700, getting 18% ownership. Jeimer Candelario at 3,900, getting 14%. I do think it makes sense on both of those guys. I actually wrote about both of them in the deep dive today. But as far as like the full stack goes, Detroit is going a little bit over-owned here. I think it's another team where I'm more likely to just, mix those guys in a little bit on lower owned stacks than full stack them. It's a high upside spot. I don't think Matt Harvey is as bad as a lot of people make him out to be. I think there's like it's that he used to be so good, and then now he's, slightly below average, give or take, and people just like make it out to be that he's absolutely terrible. But it's still a high upside spot, even if he's not as bad as people think that he is. And on top of that, you have a terrible, terrible Orioles bullpen behind him. So even if you do happen to get, let's say, 5 good innings out of Harvey, you still have some upside because they can add on runs in a hurry against whoever comes in after him. So pretty cheap pricing there. Robbie Grossman, I think, even though he is popular, he's someone that is, I think, just better at hitting than kind of most people think. He's really made some improvements going back to last year, it seems, and he's been an above average hitter for most of his career. But since the start of last season, a 120 WRC plus, he's got a 201 ISO over that time. Just has been a very good hitter. He has, I think, like 20 stolen bases over that time too, 25 home runs. He does give you upside, and it's just pretty clearly underpriced. Candelario is a pretty average hitter, slightly below average probably, but only 3,900 on DraftKings, 2,800 on FanDuel, and third base isn't a great position tonight. So another, pretty solid value. I think he's in consideration as far as cash third baseman go. Eric Haas has upside as a catcher. Scope has upside, but again, I think it's going to be more so just, mixing these guys into lineups where I have lower owned hitters.
It's so hard for me with Matt Harvey because you look at any of his numbers there with the Royals last year, they're some of the worst numbers I've ever seen in my entire life. 11.57 ERA, 10.77 expected ERA. Oh, okay. He was getting a little unlucky there. 4.63 home runs per 9 in his outings in KC last year in 7 total games. I mean, that's just as bad as it gets. Only pitched 11.2 innings, but I mean, that was ridiculous. I guess that's inflated a little bit. 1.19 here this season. So definitely, obviously improved there. Going through it, 5.42 expected ERA as opposed to the 6.13 ERA he has. So maybe not the absolute gas can, but sure, because people kind of flock to that team now. And Detroit's pretty easy to fit into things outside of Eric Haas, who just 5.1K a catcher. That's a thing. But everybody else pretty manageable and easy to fit into stacks. I don't mind it. I can't play this team as chalk. I just refuse. I've kind of stuck my heels in the ground on it one too many times here. Robbie Grossman, Jonathan Scope. Yeah, I'll fire those two up. But on the Baltimore side, your team, Cedric Mullins is the greatest player of all time. Austin Hayes never gets above 2.5K. And Trey Mancini will one day hit a home run or double dong like Anthony Santander does every single slate. Talk to me about the Orioles.
Yeah, just a ton of ownership going here too. It's kind of just similar to the Tigers for me. I think it's an okay spot. It's good hitting conditions in Baltimore. It's a good hitter's park in general. But the Orioles are just so cheap that they are getting ownership here. Austin Hayes at 2,500, another guy that I think is in consideration in cash. 23% ownership. Santander is getting 17%. Urias at 14. Mancini at 10. Then it drops off a little bit. So like if you are stacking the Orioles, I like going to Severino. I like going to Cedric Mullins, mixing those guys in because they are getting a little bit lower ownership. Severino individually, I also just really like because he actually has power. He's only 3,300 and he's not getting as much ownership as these other guys. But overall, another team that I think is just going a little bit overowned. And Tarik Skubal is not a bad pitcher. Tarik Skubal is a very boom or bust pitcher. Like it wouldn't be surprising at all if the Orioles did have a good game here. He's allowed over 2 home runs per 9 innings this season. He's really struggled with right-handed power, 256 expected ISO, 371 expected WOBA. So it's not like it would be surprising if Hayes, Mancini, Santander, like it's an entirely right-handed lineup with the exception of Mullins. But at the same time, Skubal's also struck out 25.7% of lefties. Mm-hmm. He has the 5th highest strikeout percentage on the entire slate at 26%. And he's one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. So where you have a lot of ownership going to the Orioles and you only have 17% on DraftKings going to a $6,300 Tarik Skubal, I like getting to Skubal in tournaments.
I'm right there with you. Skubal, yeah, he's going to destroy your soul a lot of the time. But that K percentage at that price point, getting this kind of leverage, I'm absolutely there with you. Anything else to touch on in this one?
I haven't built lineups yet, but I could see getting to a little bit of 5K Matt Harvey in large field DraftKings tournaments as well. Because for one, the Tigers are getting ownership. For two, he's just 5K flat, which is pretty appealing to get to. And he has made some slight improvements lately. I still don't think he's like a great pitcher by any stretch. He was in the longest scoreless streak of his career. I don't think that's going to be a thing that happens regularly, but he has been throwing his off-speed stuff more. He's cut back on his fastball, more changeups, more curveballs, coinciding with him, being a little bit better. So again, just kind of, I think Matt Harvey's a lot closer to average than other people do, and he's only 5K flat, not getting ownership against a popular team. That'll probably get him into some lineups for me.
In Detroit, we've seen some upside by some unlikely pitchers for sure. Quantrill,
Quantrill just broke a slate against them.
Yeah, like F off, dude. All right, let's move ourselves along. Oakland, minus 143 at, speak of the devil, Cleveland. Hello, 9 total runs here in this one, on one side, we got our guy, Cal Quantrill. What up, homie? Frankie Montas on the other. He's not our guy. I hate Cal Quantrill. 8.3K. I don't like you. I don't want to play you. I want to play Oakland bats against you. But Frankie Montas on the other side, you're getting J-Ram and Reyes there. We talk about them every single slate. We will continue to talk about them every single slate. And I suppose you got to put a 2.3 Bradley Zimmer, who, again, just a broken price, continues to not change. So you get by those three for sure. And I think that there's some upside here for Frankie Montas, but the price point isn't very nice. Top Pitchers Tool isn't in love with him by any means. What are we doing with Frankie Montas on this slate?
I'm pretty high on Montas in tournaments. His ownership has come up a little bit since this morning. Yeah. But we have him with the fourth highest top 2 percentage, basically the same as Kevin Gausman, who's getting like 2.5 to 3 times the ownership on DraftKings. I'm not saying I like Montas as much as I do Gausman, but I think it's an okay matchup for him. The thing that really sticks out to me about Montas, though, and it's something that I'd mentioned on a show a while ago, for the season, he has almost a 32% strikeout percentage against left-handed hitters. Against righties, though, he's only struck out 21.7%. And we had talked about it on a show where you can see why the strikeout numbers against lefties have increased from last year, because he's throwing his splitter a lot more. He's throwing it like 31% of the time. But his pitch mix against righties has been just about the same as it was last season. Last season, he struck out 28.9% of righties. Again, this year he's at 21.7. So it was kind of like, why are his numbers down so much against righties? I think there's a good chance that these increase and they get closer and you don't have this big split. I think he still does keep doing well against lefties, but I think he's going to start doing better against righties. Over his last 10 starts, which goes back to like the first week of June, he has a 32.2% strikeout percentage against lefties, which is still in line with his season numbers, but a 28.2% strikeout percentage against righties. So you have seen that strikeout percentage come up. Overall, he's been racking up strikeouts over that time. And then you get, a slightly below average Cleveland team here. I like Montas at relatively low ownership.
All righty. I do too. I had it grouped by ownership and as opposed to top 2 pitcher percentage. And that is a fantastic spot of leverage, especially on DK there on FanDuel. Actually, the second best top pitcher percentage, just a single pitcher site over there, 8.3, getting much lower ownership than Burns, than Gausman, like both of them. But Frankie Montas, definitely a cheaper spot to get to down there. Not that you need to be terribly concerned on FanDuel where hitting prices are just broken pretty much every single day.
One side note, not on this game. The weather earlier in the day for the Baltimore game looked fine. It might still look fine, but I will say it's like monsooning outside my apartment right now. So maybe keep an eye on if that forecast gets worse as we get closer to the game.
Monsooning, noted. Probably bad. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. We got boots on the ground there though in Baltimore, so that's great.
Yeah, I'm like 2 miles from the stadium, and it is windy and dark and raining really hard. But again, the game's in an hour and a half.
Cal Quantrill, how? Like that last 2 outings, actually, he's just been fantastic for the last month, and I just refuse to go there. What are you doing with Cal Quantrill against a really good Oakland lineup?
At the risk of him scoring another 35 DraftKings points, I think he's one of the worst plays on the slate when you consider the price. I mean, the matchup is terrible. Oakland's a good offense. They have power basically top to bottom, at least top to Elvis Andrus at the 9-hole. Mark Canha was questionable. He's in the lineup. It's just a good lineup. Cal Quantrill's not a particularly good pitcher. He comes in with an 18.4% strikeout percentage. He's been okay at limiting production. 4.52 xFIP is almost a full run worse than his ERA. 0.86 home runs per 9. His expected power numbers aren't bad either. 105 expected ISO to righties is very good. 177 to lefties. But I'm not paying $8,300 for Cal Quantrill against this team.
Sorry, Butthole, you deserve that. Don't come in here talking smack. You're fine. You're going to be okay. I promise. It's going to all be all right. Take 300 seconds and think about your life. The Oakland side, I'm always like getting to Oakland here when they're going a little bit underowned. It's basically flat here in this spot, but specifically, there's guys from the left side that I really, really like. Matt Olson, Jed Lowry, switch hitter. Mitch Moreland, not so much. Seth Brown, for sure. It seems like he homers every slate. He's 2.2K. A lot of cheapies here on this spot. Seth Brown with some pinch hit risk, but for sure starting out here, wind's blowing out 10 miles per hour. It's 87 degrees, 80% humidity. Sign me up for a little bit of Oakland bats here. Is that something you're interested in?
Yeah, I still need to order a Seth Brown jersey too. I keep forgetting.
Yeah, because he's your god. You worship Seth Brown now.
Yeah. Him and Rafael Ortega. But
way more Ortega. Ortega is the priority for you, sir.
No, Brown won me a 50K also.
Oh, he did? Oh,
yeah, like at the beginning of last month.
It must be nice.
But yeah, I mean, Oakland, I'm kind of just like neutral on them because I think that the ownership's about where it should be. I think it's a pretty good spot just because this team is so good and they're getting out of Oakland, which is nice as well from a hitting standpoint. But it looks like the ownership is there. And really what I think will pull me back, so like I'm around the field more so than I am over, is, you have just so many offenses around them that are going on their own, like the Dodgers, like the Blue Jays, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati. There's just a lot of offenses that I think have a similar chance of success that aren't getting quite as much ownership. So I like Oakland. I like the spot. I think I'd get to them before I got to like full stacks of Baltimore, Detroit, but also just a middle of the pack stack for me when you factor in ownership.
All right, let's keep it moving along. We got a lot to get to here still. Tampa Bay plus 102, Boston 10.5 total runs here. In this one, we've got Nathan Ivaldi, which I couldn't believe his K-prop 6.5 earlier today. I feel like that seems like something I want to be a little bit short on. This Rays lineup, I mean, they just stack up the lefties. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You got Lau, Choi, Meadows, Wendell, Phillips, and then the righties are no slouch. Oh, Wander Franco, switch hitter, of course. Don't forget about him. Nelson Cruz being a righty. Randy Arozarena being a righty. Those are guys. I mean, those are pretty good righties to have out of the middle of 7 lefties. Mejia as well, switch hitter, catcher. So how are we feeling about Nathan Eovaldi? Because, I mean, I don't really even know what to say about Josh Fleming.
I like the ownership on Eovaldi. He's only getting 6% ownership with a 10% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on DraftKings. He's reasonably priced at 8,200, but at the same time, this is a tough matchup against Tampa Bay. You're also getting the Rays outside of Tropicana Field, which is a plus for them. They have a 5.2 implied run total. It's a pretty scary spot. And the way I view this right now is I think if this were a smaller slate, I'd be more likely to get to a good amount of Eovaldi and try and, play the ownership game there. But with this being a bigger slate, I think that I'm going to be getting to somebody like Frankie Montas at 14% first. And I think there's going to be enough low owned bats that I get to where I don't necessarily care all that much about the pitching ownership. So I probably get more than 0 Eovaldi, but I think 6% makes a lot of sense given the matchup.
Okay. And Josh Fleming, anything to touch base on other than don't play him?
What'd you say? Oh, Josh
just
Fleming.
Don't play Josh Fleming. 15.8% K percentage. Limits some hard contact, but this Boston team, I just don't want to be doing that.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, Fleming is stretched out now. He went 5 innings, 75 pitches last time out, 20 fantasy points. 5 innings, 99 pitches against Boston. 2 starts ago, 17 fantasy points. But I still just don't see the need to get to Fleming. I'd rather take my shot on Boston bats.
Well, let's talk Boston bats. We'll start with them. We'll go over to the Tampa side later, kind of touch base on them a little bit here. It's nice when you're getting a team under 10%. Every single hitter looking at Fantasy Cruncher. Hunter Renfroe, your highest owned, now up to the 2-hole for Hunter Renfroe, 3,600. That looks like it could be more popular than the 9% that we have in for him right now. Our last run was at 230. I think that's going to come up. I would expect that to come up a little bit on Fleming here. Xander Bogaerts, of course, another guy there in the 3-hole. 1 through 8, play all the guys. What are we talking about for Boston that you really like?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty similar to as a full stack, they look pretty similar to Oakland, where they're kind of middle of the pack in top stack percentage or top third in top stack percentage, but the ownership is where it should be as well. But I do think there's guys that just have a lot of power upside. Hunter Renfroe, you mentioned at 3,600 is obviously a good option. JD Martinez only 4,600 is a discount. Bogaerts, shortstop's not a great position today. I think that you are going to see people in general paying down at shortstop because there's some decent point per dollar value, but there's a couple of shortstops I like paying up for in tournaments. I think Bogaerts is one of them. I think you won't really see people looking to pay up there all that much. He's projected for like 9% ownership. So I think he looks good. Renfroe looks good. JD only projected for 4% ownership at 4,600.
And the Tampa Bay side, I like these bats too. Whenever they're completely unowned, other than Cruz and Lau, which are owned pretty much every single slate, everybody on Cruncher right now is under 2%. That could make for a very, very interesting stack, especially in the back half of this lineup against Eovaldi, who, I don't necessarily want to go out of my way to pick on him. And Tampa Bay's top stack potential is still 7.2%. That just tells you the kind of upside that they provide with this lineup. Highest point of leverage, second highest point of leverage next to Toronto, 4.1 points of leverage here for Tampa Bay, or percent leverage, should I say. How are you handling them on this slate?
Yeah, Josh and I kind of had that conversation earlier because on the one hand, it's not a good matchup. Eovaldi's been really, really good this year. He's done a good job limiting power. Strikeout rate is about average. He's just been a good pitcher. But I think what it is when Tampa, there's a lot of teams that, even if the opposing pitcher is not at their best and, they give up more runs than you're expecting, they're just not a good enough offense that you really expect them to like blow a slate open and just go absolutely nuts. Whereas Tampa has so much power in this lineup. I just think that even in these pretty difficult spots, there's a relatively high chance, given the compared to everyone else, of them just being the team that just scores a million runs. They are getting outside of Tropicana Field, which is nice, plays up the power numbers, and you just have so much power in this lineup. I mean, Randy Arozarena is the 6th hitter here. Wendell, Phillips, Mejia is not the worst bottom of the order, especially when you consider that they're pretty inexpensive, but Choi at 4K looks really good. Brandon Lau looks good. Cruz, Meadows, Franco, like these guys just all have a lot of power. And most importantly, they're just not getting ownership. If this team were getting ownership like the A's or like the Red Sox, I'd back away pretty quickly because it is a tough matchup against Ivaldi. But if nobody is going to roster, or almost nobody is going to roster a team that includes this much power, then I like going there.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Anything else to finish out this game?
Nope.
All righty, let's move ourselves along. Well, you know what? This is, we got to give them the respect they deserve. Jock Market. If you guys haven't heard about Jock Market, they've turned fantasy sports into the stock exchange, and it is a lot of fun to play. It was a lot of fun to play for the NBA playoffs. It's going to be a lot of fun come MLB playoffs for sure. But even right now, there is such a great opportunity. If you're watching the games as intently as we do, if you're enjoying the opportunity to buy and sell players in real time, every second of every single slate of every single game, you have the opportunity to play Jock Market and use that information to make money instantaneously. You can use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players. Then you get to buy, sell, and trade them or hold them or do whatever you want with them after lock in order to make money based on the analysis, based on injuries, based on pinch hitters, based on anything you want. There is an opportunity to be making money on Jock Market. So head over there, use promo code Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. It's an exclusive offer here for everybody here at Awesemo. So be using that. And again, just thank you so much to Jock Market. It's such a fun site to play on, such an easy interface to use, super clean, super neat. I promise you guys will enjoy playing over there. So check it out here today. And thank you so much to them for their sponsorship. Love having them as a part of our program. Let's go along to Washington and the Mets. We did not have lines available here early, hence the dash. But it seems as though, okay, did we find the official number? Is this a 7-inning game?
I still haven't seen anything official. I think it's 7 innings based on Twitter. Like the Nats Twitter account specifically came out and said that the first game was 9 innings. And then people were replying, asking why the second game was only 7. So I think it's 7.
Okay.
But I
haven't seen anything
us. What'd you say?
I said very definitive answer from us here.
Yeah, well, it's because, like, obviously, if this were a doubleheader, we know it's 7. I'm not 100% sure what a suspended game means, but I think it's 7.
This is so weird. There's a site where it was posted, and now it's off the board. Let me just take a look at this, just making sure, doing my due diligence. Such a weird situation here with some of these games. You just kind of never know what you're going to get. Let me just double check, make sure.
If you Google like suspended game rules, it tells you all about how they're handling suspended games. It doesn't tell you about the next game.
Okay. Well, DK, they have Marcus Strowman listed on the mound. I'm pretty sure he's there. He's a great real life pitcher.
Pinnacle says 7 innings.
Pinnacle says 7. Okay, good. We're gonna go with 7 because again, I feel like going to Vegas lines is such an efficient way to do it, but it's not posted, so I can't tell you exactly without seeing the implied run totals. I have calculated in my spreadsheet 2.61 for Washington, so I think that automates from a couple of the sites that I use. So 2.6 would tell me that is going to be a 7-inning game. I mean, Washington has an abysmal lineup, so I never really know. But Marcus Strowman, really good real life pitcher. However, you do have a couple of trouble spots here. You get Soto in there, you get Josh Bell in there. Those are 2 problem bats, but otherwise it's pretty smooth sailing. Do we have some interest in Marcus Strowman if people aren't necessarily identifying this as like a must play spot?
Oh, DraftKings now does also say 7 innings.
Okay, good.
Yeah, nice of them to update that. So I have some interest in Strowman just because, for one, it being a 7-inning game increases his ceiling somewhat because he's someone that does go deep in the games. He can get you. He can get you a complete game. He's not in the top pitcher stool right now, but I expect that he'll come in somewhere around like Ivaldi in that 8 to 10% range. And this morning he wasn't projected for much ownership either. If that's the case, I do like getting him a little bit in tournaments just because the matchup against Washington is good. It's just a bad offense. And, again, I think that there is some upside there, but the problem that you'll run into is still that there's some really legitimately high upside pitchers on this slate. And in terms of strikeout percentage, Strowman's not one of them.
For me, though, the freak out part is just understanding that if you had to tell me one pitcher to get a complete game shutout on this slate, don't you pick Marcus Strowman?
Yeah.
Like he is the auto pick. So I just want to throw it out there just in terms of upside, I think he carries more upside than he does normal days just because of that potential of a complete game bonus, which is maybe what, a 2% chance of such a thing in this spot, 3% chance.
Probably
like
something like that. I mean, you're basically saying, like, for a complete game, you're basically just saying Marcus Strowman goes 7 innings, which is a semi-frequent occurrence. Shutout obviously is less likely.
Okay. But I just want to put it out there that, so I'm saying the shutout, a complete game shutout would be like a 2-3% chance I would throw out in this scenario. Sure, you've got Soto and Bell to worry about. Some of these other guys, I know you've referenced that they've been hitting a little bit better of late, but Marcus Strowman, never the highest upside pitcher. I very, very rarely ever play this dude, but I have a tiny bit of interest just because I don't know what that number is going to be coming into this slate, how much interest he's gaining. He's not even in our top pitchers tool right now, so I'm very interested to see where he might show up in a top 2 pitcher percentage, more so than not. I'm not going to be playing a ton, but I want to get to a little bit for sure. On the other side of this, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, yeah, my guess is that he shows up somewhere around Ivaldi, around like 8 to 10% in terms of top 2 pitcher percentage, and that he comes in, I don't know, like 8 to 9% ownership.
Okay. Yeah, that's
complete just guess off the top of my head, but
okay. Well, I love the math you just did in your brain. You played DFS every single day, so I trust you more than the average human being throwing off a number for ownership for sure. I think you're probably right with that. Jeffrey Rodriguez starting for Washington, going to be a bullpen game. He hasn't gone more than 3 innings here in an outing since what would it be, June 12th. Looking through this, 33 pitches his last time out against Philadelphia. He'll start off and it'll just be bullpen straight through. I don't love getting to a lot of these kind of spots, and now it's a 7-inning game. Can we just basically write off the rest of this game outside of Strowman? Yeah,
I think so. It's an okay spot against Rodriguez and the Nats. The problem is just that there's 20 other teams playing, and you're going to choose to take teams that are only batting 7 times at most.
And we got the boss man, came in 7 innings for sure. So that's great to have him. Thank you, Alex Baker, the GOAT, hanging out in chat here. Much, much appreciated. Let's move ourselves along now. Cincinnati back to 9-inning regular, not garbage. Here we go. Cincinnati plus 109 at Atlanta, 9.5 total runs here, 4.6 implied runs going up against my boy Touki Toussaint, who just completely, well, we're going to be talking about splitters a lot today. So we'll talk about splitters here in this one too. Touki Toussaint, 8.1K is just a larger number here, and you've got some lefty power: Winker, Votto, Moustakas, Naquin. Those are some guys that I'm a little bit worried about here in this spot. I see it going very well or very poorly for Touki. Under 1%, I'm willing to find out if that indeed holds true. Even if he were to be 3-4%, I'm happy to get over the field on him just because of what that K rate can be. How about yourself?
The very, very low ownership is kind of appealing. I don't love the spot for him here because I do think it's a dangerous offense in Cincinnati. But what stands out to me is, we already talked about liking Tarek Skubal at 6,300. But you do have one pitcher right now in this price range getting a lot of ownership, and that's Tyler Anderson against Texas. We'll get to him later, and I think he's a perfectly fine play. But I don't think he should be getting 24% and Touki Toussaint getting like 1% because Toussaint's upside is just so high here. He's got excellent strikeout stuff. He also just walks a lot of guys, can give up some power. He's an extremely volatile pitcher, but that's kind of what you want. You're not even kind of, that is what you want in large field tournaments, is low owned guys that have the potential to legitimately go get you 25, 30 fantasy points, and you're not going to think twice about it. And that's what he gives you here. The Reds implied run total has dropped a bit throughout the day as well. It's a very risky spot, but the upside is certainly there for Touki Toussaint. No Jonathan India tonight for the Reds either, which weakens the lineup a little bit.
Yeah, so his sinker, he's throwing that just at a ridiculous clip. Coming off of 2020, where he only threw it at a 5% clip, he's up to 54% of the time throwing the sinker. He's trying to get ahead in counts, and then he's going to that curveball and the split finger I alluded to, where it's a whiff percentage right around 42% combined between the two pitches. Put away percentage 44.4% with the split finger specifically. So that's a pretty lethal pitch. As long as he's ahead in counts, he can kind of get that going, and it can be deceptive. And that's why you're seeing that K rate. It's only at 20. It's just around 25% here on the season. We've seen it be much, much higher in the past in some spots, 26, 25 in different spots. He can definitely spike some upside. He can also walk everybody and their dog, and then you're in a lot of trouble. We've seen that in the past as well, but a 6.5% walk rate here so far. Maybe the usage, maybe this sinker specifically, if he's locating that thing and getting ahead in counts, he could have some fun with some of these Cincy batters. So definitely a boomer bust spot that I'm kind of noticing there. Wade Miley on the other side, a guy that is kind of middle of the road. He's kind of got the same thing going on here with Touki. Maybe not exactly the same amount of K potential, but talk to me about him going up against Atlanta.
It's harder for me to get to Miley just because the strikeout stuff isn't as good. Josh's question this morning was like, if you had a 1-game playoff, would you rather have Wade Miley or Toussaint pitching for you? And I said, I think I would go Miley just because I think the range of outcomes is tighter and there's a better chance that he just like gets you 5 innings and you get, into your bullpen. But in DFS, I would rather have Toussaint because there's a better chance that he just goes absolutely nuclear and, ends up being a pitcher you have to have. So it's harder for me to get to Miley in tournaments. As far as bats go, I actually have some interest in both sides. Neither team getting a ton of ownership here. And the Reds, while they certainly could strike out a lot against Toussaint, the other side of that is they could walk a lot. They hit a couple home runs. They get him out of the game. They are only getting about 2% aggregate ownership or 1.5% aggregate ownership on DraftKings right now. So I think they look good. They're just in a high upside spot. And then on the other side, I just love the additions that the Braves have made to their lineup. Wade Miley's not a pitcher that gives up a lot of power. He generally does a pretty good job of limiting it. He's held ready to a 133 actual ISO this year, 143 expected ISO. But what stands out to me is he only has struck out 18.1% of hitters. And you have a lot of swing and miss guys that are also really powerful in this Braves lineup. When you look at Jorge Soler, Austin Riley, Dansby Swanson, Adam Duvall, even Travis d'Arnaud has power from the right side. And then, Albie's just a good overall hitter that has power. Freeman, a good overall hitter that has power. 1 through 7 here, you have a lot of power where, kind of like we had talked about before with the Dodgers and Kyle Gibson, Miley's been good this year, but you have to remember that there's a lot more power in this Braves lineup than there is in most lineups. And it's a really risky proposition to be letting these guys put the ball in play.
I love it too. Soler, Duvall, fantastic additions. Travis d'Arnaud now 4-hole or in the 7-hole 4K. Fine adding him to a bunch of these lineups as well. Heredia 2.2K, cheap on the back end. Atlanta just looks really, really good to me up against Wade Miley as well. I like that call. Favorite bat from Cincinnati to go up against Tukey.
Castellanos is still just mispriced, I think, at 4,400.
All right, love it. And favorite on Atlanta side?
Soler, 3,600.
Love it too. All right. We're going to fly. Milwaukee minus 250 at Chicago, 10 total runs. Be on the lookout for weather. That is the main weather concern we have on the entire day. Not to say that Philadelphia and the Dodgers don't have some. And it sounds like there is a hurricane occurring on your side for sure.
Can you hear that?
Oh yeah, totally can. I've been hearing it like throughout the entire show. It sounds, I was just making sure that you didn't have like a garbage truck backing into your apartment right now, in which case you need to like get the hell out of there. Just move. But
anyway, I have like the blackout curtains pulled too and can still see the lightning everywhere. So I think it's a pretty good one.
Oh, fantastic. So take your Baltimore Detroit bats out. No, don't do that. I have no idea yet. But I will definitely be DMing you. So you better fricking respond. How about that? Freddie Peralta on one side, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta yesterday. I apologize for yesterday. That was a terrible, terrible break for pretty much anything Ashby related. Corbin Burns, though, much, much better pitcher. But he's expensive, 10.3K. Fantastic hitting environment, 85 degrees, 80% humidity, wind blowing out 15 miles an hour in Wrigley, but only a 3.6 implied run for the Cubbies. I like both sides a lot. I want a lot of Burns in this spot, so long as the weather holds up. I don't want a lot of Cubs because I think they'll come in under owned. How about you?
I'm with you on Burns. Okay. I think you've lost your mind on the Cubs. But
I'm just saying that it's wind blowing out. Can you get the ball in the air? I don't know. Rafael
Devers
is a god.
They're 1% owned and it's warm and the wind's blowing out in Wrigley. That's the argument. Okay,
that's all I have. Yeah, that is the only argument.
And Burns is getting 45% ownership. So I get it. I don't think I'll be there. But
there you go. We just talked into it together.
Yeah, I understand it. But yeah, for Burns, definitely pay attention to the weather. Right now, I think it looks like it should be later inning stuff, in which case Burns should be okay. He's far and away the best, most talented pitcher on the slate. 35% strikeout percentage, 2.35 xFIP. 30.3 K minus BB percentage is just absurd. For context, the next highest on the slate is Gossman at 22.7%, 0.4 home runs per 9, and he's facing just a really, really, really bad Cubs lineup. So absolutely love Burns. I'm planning, the way things look right now, I'm planning on rolling with Burns. It's also nice because if we do get bad news as this game approaches, you can really easily swap to Kevin Gossman. You can really easily swap to Alek Manoah. Tyler Anderson's there too. There's options after that game, which is really nice.
I feel like you're the Bishop in Caddyshack and you're going to win 100K while getting struck down by lightning. Cause I just keep hearing it over and over now. You don't know that reference, do you?
I mean, I know it's a movie. I think I've seen it.
You're disappointing me. Whatever. We're going to move on. Chicago Cubs on the other side here. This is a fantastic hitting environment. Milwaukee the ownership's going to be outrageous if that game is for sure going to be going here. 17.5% ownership share, still the top stack on the board, 13%. I think rightfully so. How are you handling them with all this weather situation? Do you think they come in around that? And how much would you be playing them if things were all good to go today?
I just think I really like the spot. I think Jake Arrieta is washed. I think the hitting conditions are great. They're just getting a lot of ownership, which, again, it just kind of comes back to, I think if you play large field tournaments over the course of an entire baseball season, you're better off being underweight on spots like that. One thing that this has even changed since this morning. And when I wrote the deep dive article, I had mentioned that I really liked Willy Adames because he was more expensive. Eduardo Escobar was more expensive, and we didn't really have ownership projected to those guys. But now we even have, Adames at 15%. We have Escobar at 18%. It's really, really difficult to get low-owned guys in this lineup. Really, the lowest you can get to is Garcia or Kane at 8-9%. So it's another one of these teams where if you're putting all five of them together, you're just getting so much combined ownership there that you're either going to really need to go off the board at pitching and with one-offs, or it's just you're gonna be competing with a lot of teams. So typically the way I end up approaching that is, like, if you look at my exposures across 150 lineups, I might still end up coming in around 15-20% on some of these guys, but they won't really be lumped together so much as they'll just be mixed in with stacks that I know are going to be 2 or 3% on.
And on the Cubbies side, Ortega 3.1K, he's cheap. Schwindel in the cleanup 2K, Matt Duffy 2K, Dykeman 2K. Everybody's 2K. Everybody can be 2K because Corbin Burns is really good at pitching. But for me, it's just price play everybody else, have like 4% of the Cubs and move on with my day. Anything really stick out to you? Because you already called me crazy and that was hurtful.
No, I mean, there's no one guy that stands out because nobody has a good matchup against Corbin Burns. If Corbin Burns is doing Corbin Burns things, these guys, you can't point to one guy and say, oh, this matchup looks good. But so it's basically, you can 5-man stack them and say, maybe Corbin Burns isn't completely on top of his game. Maybe he just gets unlucky and 3 fly balls get blown over the fence. So it's more so in this spot, I think, get 5 Cubs if you want to go that route. But I would not be very happy just having Cubs mixed in individually to lineups.
All right, Alek Manoah on the hill here for the Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to speed through some of this. -182 for them, 5.6 implied runs. I love Toronto today for sure. Going up against Dylan Bundy, the corpse of Dylan Bundy, the artist formerly known as Dylan Bundy here. A 441 expected slugging for him, 21.5K percentage. Going up against this Toronto team that just doesn't strike out against righties. Doesn't look good for him. But Alek Manoah might look really, really good for him. How do you feel about him today? Because the top 2 pitcher percentage definitely loves him.
Yeah, I like Manoah quite a bit here. It also helps that he basically has the same top 2 pitcher percentage as Grossman, and he's getting like 60% of the ownership. Same boat as Montas. He's getting like twice the ownership as Montas, but looks like he's coming in probably around where he should. I just think there's a lot of upside for him here. He's still got some, there's still going to be some inconsistencies with him. He still had some issues with power. He walks a little bit more guys than you would like. His xFIP's a little bit over 4, but he has the 3rd highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Burns and Grossman. And with, we don't have an Angels lineup yet, but with them calling up a couple of their top prospects in Joe Adell and Brandon Marsh, they've added some strikeout upside to this lineup that already basically, you had Shohei Ohtani that you were really concerned about. And then it was basically guys that aren't great hitters anyway. But now there's a lot more strikeout upside depending on what the lineup is, because we already know Upton will strike out, Stassi will strike out, but you add Joe Adell, who in his major league career has struck out 39% of the time. Brandon Marsh, since being called up in 23 games, has struck out 36% of the time. That's adding a lot more upside for Alek Manoah. It's also a positive park shift for him going into LA. We have a lot of, warm games and good hitters parks. Now you're getting a not as friendly hitters park and not as warm weather in this one either.
And I already just said that I love Toronto here in this spot going up against Dylan Bundy. I'm assuming no Dylan Bundy interest today.
No interest in Bundy for me. He did have a good start last time out, but it was against Texas, so I don't want to read too much into that. And it's just, a really, really difficult matchup for someone like Bundy that has really struggled with home runs for most of his career. He seemed like he had fixed those issues last year, but he's come back this year and given up 1.78 home runs per 9. Just a brutal lineup to go up against. Toronto is expensive enough that it should keep their ownership down. We have them with the 3rd highest top stack percentage, but we have them getting like in the middle of the pack in ownership. So they do look like they'll be going a bit on their own. Really high upside spot if you can afford to get there. Individually, I think Teoscar Hernandez is nice because he gives you a discount at 4,500. Corey Dickerson at only 2,900. Grichuk at 3,800. Like if you needed cheaper bats, but you still wanted to get to Toronto, we don't have the lineup, but assuming you have that Hernandez, Dickerson, Grichuk trio, I think that's a high upside approach that's a little bit less expensive.
and the Angels. You don't need me to tell you that you can play Shohei Ohtani against absolutely anybody, but anybody else that sticks out for you for the Angels?
Nope.
Okay, cool. We're going to move ourselves along then. First of all, before we get into the last two games, two pitchers that we really want to talk about in these last two games. Awesemo Plus tools and content, $29.95 for a weekly pass right now. Use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word. Plug that in for 25% off your first week right now. If you're a first-time user here of Awesemo Plus, everything, player projections, ownership projections, premium Slack channel lineup builder, and much, much more here. Everything is so much greener on this side of I don't know that saying. What am I trying to say? All I'm trying to say is 25% off is a fantastic deal. You should take advantage of that now. If you just want MLB for Awesemo Plus, $15.95 for that. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. Thank you so much, Jordan Klein, best producer in the game named Jordan. Say that every single time around, just absolutely crushing the game here. Let's do this here because 5 minutes. Arizona plus 249 going up against the Giants. 8 total runs here. Kevin Gausman one side, Merrill Kelly the other, both expensive. Kevin Gausman, a lot of interest. Merrill Kelly, do you have any interest today? Because he seems very under-owned in this spot.
I'm interested in Gausman. I don't really see myself getting to Kelly.
Okay.
Gausman, I think, is probably getting a little bit too much ownership. I mentioned him relative to Montas. I mentioned him relative to Manoah. Probably should get, like 25, 30% instead of the 40% he's currently projected for. But at the same time, this is a really good spot. It's a very good pitcher. Second highest strikeout percentage on the slate, second highest K minus BB percentage, 3.37 xFIP, 0.82 home runs per 9, and also facing an Arizona team with a 2.8 implied run total. Just a really weak offense, plenty of strikeouts here for Gausman as well. So, and in a good pitcher's park. So it's one of those where I still think I'm going to get to Gausman a good amount. But if you do have a lineup that's a little bit chalkier than you would like elsewhere, going from Gausman down to, like a Montas or something like that, I think is a perfectly fine move in terms of just the difference in ownership. But excluding ownership, fantastic spot for Gausman. Absolutely love him.
Yeah, I was trying to lead the witness a little bit there because Merrill Kelly going up against the Giants, 200 ISO, best in baseball against right-handed pitching for the Giants. But Merrill Kelly still, 25.5% K percentage for the Giants against righties as well in a fantastic ballpark. I wouldn't say, I have interest in both sides. I'm going to get a couple shares of Merrill Kelly. I think that's probably just going to be what happens, but nothing in any kind of a meaningful way. Would much rather stack up the Giants here if they're going to be a little bit overlooked on this slate. Going over to the top pitchers tool, 3.8% top stack potential, 2.2% ownership share. I think some one-offs, some nice 2 and 3 mans here from this team make a lot of sense. What are you doing with the Giants bats?
Yeah, I like the Giants because I think, like we've talked about a lot of teams that are getting a little bit less ownership than they deserve. And normally it's been in the context of they're expensive, so they're difficult to get to. The Giants look like a little bit better value team. They're kind of similar to Philadelphia in that way, where I don't know why they're priced down as cheap as they are. Merrill Kelly is an okay pitcher, but he's not someone that I'm super concerned about. And this is a team that has the second highest ISO against right-handed pitching on their active roster, fourth highest WRC plus. And you're getting Brandon Belt at 4,200, Crawford at 4,400, Yastrzemski at 4,100, Dickerson at 2,700, Wade at 3,200. I messed around this morning on the show with Josh, and on DraftKings, you can plug in Kevin Gausman plus Corbin Burns, 5-man stack, like the middle of the order for San Francisco, and still have 3K plus to fill out the last 3 spots of your lineup, which isn't really difficult to do on this slate. So I just think that they're mispriced, and they're one of the teams that is really underpriced, but actually not getting ownership. Whereas, you have teams like the Cardinals and the Orioles that are underpriced and pulling a lot of it. The Giants seem to be going a little bit overlooked here.
You must pick one bat from Arizona. Who do you pick? None of them. That's the right answer. Well done.
I was going to say, it's either Marte or Calhoun. Calhoun's 1,200 less expensive.
Okay. Yeah, I don't mind that either. As Drupal Cabrera, let's not chase that. That seems like a good idea. Let's show the discretion is the better part of valor. So we'll do that. Texas Rangers, 3.3 implied runs. Spencer Howard with a C. Not the other Spencer. I always love every time I see the word Spencer written out now in baseball, I think of Spencer with an S. Whatever. Tyler Anderson on the other side, 7.6K. He is the one. He is the value pitcher that everybody is kind of plugging in. 24.6% ownership. We only have an 8.7% top 2 pitcher percentage. I rarely see this large of a discrepancy between somebody who's kind of in the mid-range. I understand Texas is terrible, but are they terrible enough that we want to roster Tyler Anderson as chalk?
I think Tyler Anderson's fine. If he weren't getting ownership, I'd like him. The issue I run into when you think about tournaments is could Anderson go out and have a good game against Texas? He definitely could, but you have Tarek Skubal with a higher top 2 percentage at a lower price point and less ownership. I'm going to end up with more Skubal, I would think, than Tyler Anderson. I think it's a very good spot. I understand why people are going to Anderson. You have a 3.3 implied run total on Texas compared to a 5 implied run total for the Orioles. It's just, for lack of a better phrase, a safer spot for Anderson. I think he's an okay pitcher. I think he probably goes a little bit underrated because of how long he pitched in Colorado. He comes in with a 4.44 xFIP, 19.6% strikeout percentage, 5.7% walk percentage between Pittsburgh and Seattle this year. It's a bad Texas offense. It's a pretty good park to pitch in Seattle. I don't mind Tyler Anderson. I just think that if he's going to be projected for 24% ownership in tournaments, I would rather be moving some of that to Skubal. I'd rather move some of it to Ivaldi. I'd rather move some of it to Toussaint than just be piling on a popular Tyler Anderson.
And as far as bats go here in this spot, any interest whatsoever, Texas Rangers has a crazy amount of leverage that you would get going to them against a super popular mid-tier, not very good pitcher.
I like Adolis Garcia individually.
Okay, as do I. 3.3K, the guy averages like north of 8.5 DK points. I don't know what that means. I just know that he does better things than anybody else does in this entire lineup for sure. And then on the other side, the Mariners, 4.8 implied runs is a larger number going up against Spencer Howard here in this spot. Spencer Howard, no leverage to be had going up against him for sure. Kalenic's up to 6-hole. Maybe he's getting a little bit better here in this spot, but what's your Mariners interest?
There's just so many other teams I like on the slate. It makes it kind of difficult. And also I haven't seen anything official, but I'm expecting the Spencer Howard, like 3 innings or so, where Howard has actually struggled in the majors is when he gets like into the 4th and 5th inning. But I'm expecting that they piggyback with Taylor Hearn again, which just is a pretty unappealing matchup too. So smaller slate, I would make a case for Seattle. On this slate, I think I already have enough teams that I like.
Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right. Well, we did it. Oh man. 11. While I'm trying to figure out what to do with this freaking NFT, this Tom Brady Emerald that I got stuck with. Well, not stuck with, that's the wrong vernacular. I absolutely love that I got this thing, but any final words for the people, Adam?
Nope. Good luck.
Did you get in this last drop?
Oh, good question. I think I might have X'd out of it again. Oh yeah. No, never mind. There's 14,000 people ahead of me.
Oh, that's probably not ideal. What is ideal is that you guys don't have to go anywhere. We have on the same stream coming up right after us, the Live Before Lock crew. Going to take you guys all the way up to it. That's Josh. That's Terry. Oh, it's a family affair. I can't wait for that. You guys need to smash the like button, hit that notification bell, all of the good things that help us out. He's Adam Scherer. He's the best. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm okay. We'll catch you later.
you're fine. Come on. I barely moved it. Give me that shit, Jordan. And we are live. Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. It is Wednesday, August 11th. I almost remembered that, but it was pretty close. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Terry McBride. We are here to break down everything as we lead up to the 7:05 lock. But before we get there, hit that like button. 133 is not nearly enough. We need to run that number up a little bit. 200 seems fantastic, but let's bump that bad boy up. Subscribe to the channel. Then open up a different tab, search for Awesemo Odds on YouTube, subscribe to that channel, then subscribe to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, because we've got all the channels now and you want to subscribe to all of them. You don't want to miss a single piece of content that we have. Now we can start where we always start. Terry, how are you?
Doing pretty well, man. It's been a long, weird kind of a day. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I was working on my baseball article like early, right before noon, and all of a sudden somebody just opened the front door of my apartment and kind of strolled right into my living room, which was a little weird. Apparently they're showing the place across the hall, so I had to chase him out. It was just a strange kind of a day, but we're getting through. I think we got an interesting baseball slate to talk about, so we're good. Hopefully picking up from here. Gonna have some beers with some buddies later on for the first time in a while.
Did you invite the new stranger for a drink?
If they took the place, maybe I will, because I do like my landlord, so I couldn't really fly off the handle as much as I might have wanted to, because I do want the place to rent for the landlord and all. So maybe if they took it, they get invited.
Was the landlord with him when he walked in?
No, the real estate agent was. So I did give that guy hey, come on, control your showing, man. Part of your job is to not let these people wander around my building.
Oof.
Yeah,
that's oh my God, it's too many questions that are probably going to get me in trouble. We got a lot to talk about, lots of news. I want to hit on the most recent piece, this coming from the boss man himself in our premium Slack, but I'm going to give that goods to the rest of the people. The boss man is looking like he's going to fade the Milwaukee-Chicago game. Looks like it's start rating around 8 and go for a long time. So it looks like Alex is dodging that game. What say you? Kind of concerning to me. I have the Brewers pretty clearly as my top stack, although pretty aggressively over-owned. So I kind of wanted people to have that game and still do. But what are you doing with it now?
Yeah, that's concerning if Alex is seeing something that's getting him off of that game. I mean, we've obviously got the major pitching situation going in that game with Corbin Burns going there and from Milwaukee. I was trying not to get basically to the Milwaukee bats. I wasn't getting any of them for one-offs. I think they're too popular for that. I was hoping to come up at least undercutting the field by a good margin on that. I had no interest in Jake Arrieta or the Cubs, but if we're losing Corbin Burns off this slate and then we're losing all that weight on those bats, that's going to transfer all of those ownership shares to probably the Blue Jays and some of these other teams that I wanted to be on. So if we lose that kind of sucks in multiple ways. And I was planning on having a pretty big share of Corbin Burns here too. So I don't like that.
So I would have been happy to be lighter than the field on Burns. I've come down on him a little bit since the strategy show this morning. And hold on. Yeah, we were going to talk pitchers anyway, so this is perfect. I couldn't remember if stacks were first or pitchers were first. So pitchers works perfectly. I was going to come down a little bit on Burns. I closed that gap between him and Grossman as the day moved on. But now, I mean, that's an extra... Well, it all depends on how owned Burns still stays, which I assume will still be a pretty healthy chunk. I mean, he is very clearly the top projected pitcher. That changes the slate a lot, though, just in terms of construction. I hope people still roster the Brewers and that game gets axed, but that was going to be my hope one way or the other. What other pitchers do you like, at least at the top end for right now?
So just real quick to round that off, just in Premium Slack, Alex was looking at Dark Sky, the weather site that he kind of put us all onto, and they look a little bit cleaner for that game. So he's kind of his I don't want to use the word waffling, but it seems like the boss might be waffling on that call a little bit right now. So let's wait and see before we fully pull that game, because I was looking at Dark Sky as well, and it does look like they've got it clear up until midnight, and that's when the rain hits. It's partly cloudy. It's not good conditions necessarily, but it's going to be warm there. It's going to be windy. Those are kind of hitty kind of conditions. It's an interesting spot if the weather holds. So I wouldn't pull it just yet. I think I'm going to wait. And going back to the question you actually asked.
Yeah.
Do you want to...
No, you're good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so picking up from there, the guy you mentioned is my number 2 is Kevin Gausman going up against Arizona. I think that's a really solid spot for Kevin Gausman. I think he gives you at least like a degree of safety on this slate. You're going to be riding with a good amount of the field, but just given that matchup, I think he's at least safe enough. 30% strikeout rate for him this season over 22 starts, inducing a 14.9% swinging strike rate, 31.3% CSW. Decent on the contact stuff, nothing overly troubling, and there's just nothing in that Diamondbacks lineup. So I like him there, and then it's pretty straightforward down the line for me, except for Alek Manoah projects a little bit worse for me than we've got him on the site. But I've got Waino up there, I've got Montas up there, I've got Anderson hanging on to relevance. So I'm basically similar with what we've got at the site, at least on the top end.
The Maharishi with the super chat, contributing to the deadbolt for Terry's front door fund. So helping me out a little bit there. That's nice to see. So for me, I'm a little higher on Ivaldi than the field. I'm pretty neutral on Wainwright, on Manoah, on Montas, on Tyler Anderson, on Skubal. All those guys are just sort of showing up pretty normal to me. The one guy that's not, and I guess I probably need to like dig into a little bit because I'm not entirely sure why it's the case. I mean, I guess I sort of know. I like David Price a little bit more than the 0% ownership that he's pulling right now, unless I'm just crazy and I don't like it's pulling in incorrectly. No, it's not. We're just projecting him for no ownership. I would rather have a little bit more than 0 David Price today at 6,600.
There's certainly upside there. He went, I was just pulling up the game log, 5 1/3 the last time out, 18 batters faced. So he was pretty efficient that start. But yeah, I mean, if they're going to give him the length, I'm not overly concerned about the idea that David Price could have a good start there. Going up against that Phillies club, it's not necessarily my favorite one to attack in the entire league, but in general, I think they've got a little bit better of a reputation than maybe what they actually are on the field, particularly against lefties. 24.6% strikeout rate below average, 3.91% home run rate, 175 team ISO, slightly above average, and then create runs 7% better than average. So they are good, but there are strikeouts there, and they're maybe not quite as good as people give them credit for. So I think there's definitely the ability for him to get through clean. He doesn't project out great for me, but I suspect I didn't actually go in and check it. So I'll see if I've got an innings issue on Price, and actually maybe I'll give him an adjustment. I don't think it's going to thrust him all the way into relevance for me, but let's see if I change that.
And here's my actual data behind it. I have Price in for 5 innings, and I just see Tyler Anderson sitting there at 24% owned. Price is $1,000 cheaper. Now I have Price projected lower. I've Price at 12.9 DK points. I've got Tyler Anderson at 15.6. But that allowed me to come in when I ran my Sims, Tyler Anderson at 19%, David Price at 11. So it's not as if I'm trying to grab, 20, 30% of David Price. But I think something in that 10% range, if we really think he's going to be around 1, is not the craziest scenario in the world.
No, not at all. And it's a pitcher that we've seen succeed in the past. He was an apex pitcher for a while. And right now, 51 innings, partly out of the pen, 20% strikeout rate, 20.6% strikeout rate, struggling with putting a few too many guys on base, but only walking 6.3%, 1.37 on the whip. So it seems like there's a little bit of BABIP luck in there, not allowing a lot of barrels, limiting hard hit rate. So there's plenty to like about David Price in this spot. There's certainly strikeouts there for him. So yeah, I don't dislike that especially for ownership and cost. Why not?
Particularly because below Tyler Anderson, under that $7,600 price tag, the only guy that's getting any ownership whatsoever is Skubal at 19%. The next highest number of ownership is Matt Harvey at 1.3. There's no one else getting paid down to. I'm happy to at least find one additional guy. Do you have anybody else as a value option that you're willing to pay down for?
For me, it's probably going to be a pretty tight pitching slate. I don't love this crop of pitchers. Touki Toussaint would be a guy who's got some upside to me in a general sense, but I don't love throwing him at this Cincinnati lineup in this situation. Just seems like a spot we don't need to go to. I think he's got the acumen to certainly rack up some strikeouts here. If he gets through the lineup, twice clean, twice plus a little bit clean, then yeah, he could have a decent start for 7,700 on the FanDuel slate and 8,100 on the DK slate. But it's not like you're getting him at a bargain basement price. If he was below that 8,000 mark into the mid to low sevens, he'd be a little bit more compelling there. You're not getting him with any ownership on him. That's the one thing. And I think that's why is because he's going up against that Reds lineup. So that would be the key for me, is just the matchup. But I think if I'm going to anybody in that tier that we haven't really talked about, it would probably be him. I just think there's enough upside there in terms of the strikeouts that he's the guy that could potentially grab you some points.
A's and Guardians is going to be starting delayed. Best I could tell from everybody else, that's not really going to be a problem, and they should be able to start when that second pass comes through. Are you treating that game any differently?
No, I hadn't heard anything earlier that would make me do that. I'll fire up Cleveland. That's in Cleveland, right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, so let me just fire them up. Yeah, it looks like that's stopping around 8 p.m. Cleveland time, so I think we're fine to go, especially if they've already announced a late start. That's actually better, because then we know we'll get the pitchers safe. So, yeah, I like that spot, and I like Frankie Montas in the spot. Cal Quantrill is another guy who, in that conversation of young pitcher, could be interesting, not somebody anybody's on. I don't think he's there yet, and I don't think he's there against this Oakland team. But in certain spots, and we've seen him do it once or twice already this season, I think he can be interesting. It's just not the spot tonight for me. But I am on Frankie Montas. Under 10% ownership, I think, is interesting on the FanDuel slate. Only like 15% over on the DK slate. Relatively affordable on both sites. Going up against the Cleveland lineup that has a little bit of power through the middle, particularly Jose Ramirez and Franmil Reyes, but not much else to speak of. A little bit around the edges with some speed if guys get on base, but just not a great lineup. So I don't mind throwing some Frankie at the Cleveland lineup here. 26.3% strikeout rate for him over 125 innings. Adam talked on the last show about how that's been ticking up gradually against right-handed hitters. What you do have to worry about with Montas is the contact. 9.3% barrel ball rate, 43.9% hard hit rate is a little ugly. But if he gets through clean, doesn't make any mistakes against basically two hitters in this lineup, I think we're fine.
The pitching ownership today is really, really interesting. Every guy that's in double digits, I think, basically deserves his ownership. I think Burns is a little high. I think Gausman's a little high, but they clearly are the two best options today at the top of this. Manoah is in double digits. I agree with it. Montas, double digits. I agree with it. Anderson, double digits. Clearly agree with it. Skubal, agree with it. And then everybody else is just not owned. You're either getting double digits in ownership today, or no one's touching you whatsoever outside of Ivaldi at 6%. So my question to you is this, and it's twofold. Is anybody that's getting that ownership a problem to you? Or is there anybody that's not getting any of that ownership that should? It's a really weird dichotomy where it's basically just cut in, I don't want to say half, but like 1/3, 2/3.
Yeah, and that's really the case. That's how it looked earlier today when I was writing it up. And I was thinking, maybe if I dug in a little bit more, somebody would emerge, like a Merrill Kelly, let's say, against San Francisco with the strikeouts in that lineup. But there's just a lot of guys who are the middling type options happen to be in the bad spots, and the good pitchers happen to be in the good spots. So it's just really enhancing the opportunity for all the good pitchers, and is really limiting the opportunity for any of the guys that would normally be, all right, that guy's a mid-range option, a Tukey, a Merrill Kelly, even a Tyler Anderson. To me, like, I don't love that idea. So if I'm going to anybody as far as being over-owned, to me, it's Tyler Anderson. I don't love getting to him with, near double negative leverage on the DK slate. And I think even more than that, I think approaching like triple on the FanDuel slate. To me, Tyler Anderson hasn't earned that much ownership. I get that he's a better pitcher than we've seen over the years, or that his reputation is, but we're still talking about a guy who's essentially below a league average pitcher. So I just really don't see the need to get there, even against a bad team. There's enough power between Adolis Garcia and Nate Lowe in that lineup that they could turn on a ball and ding him a little bit here, just put enough of a dent on him that these other guys just race past him. And I just think there's so much upside that for the price differential, you're probably not going to come anywhere near it in terms of what the score is going to be that you get on the other side of this. So for me, the over on guy's Anderson.
Okay, that works for me. Any other pitchers that you want to touch on, whether that's FanDuel, DK, etc.?
You want to go into what you're seeing with Ivaldi a little bit? Because I'm getting him projected out like he's 6th or 7th on my board. He projects fairly well. I just hate the matchup. I like going against the Rays with lefties. I went after them with Eduardo Rodriguez a little bit yesterday. Against righties, they're a completely different team. The strikeouts are still there, 24.9% strikeout rate, but a 205 collective ISO, 4.74% home run rate, both lead the league, and then they create runs 16% better than average against righties. So it's a tough spot for a pitcher that's really, a one-trick pony with his velo and his one breaking ball. I don't really like going to Ivaldi. I don't really trust him. What are you seeing? Or is it just projection and ownership based?
A little bit of projection and ownership base, mostly the ownership. So I have him 7th overall, just in terms of fantasy points. He showed up in 12% of my sims. That's the 8th highest number. But at 12%, that's twice as much as his ownership. So to me, he's just simply a leverage pitcher that I think that I can get to. Similar story for David Price, but Price at 6,600. It's a lot easier to stomach than it is for Ivaldi at 8,200. He's just kind of like, I don't like the idea of going up against the Rays. I think this team is really good. They're running out a ton of lefties. It doesn't seem appealing on the surface. 10.5 run implied total certainly doesn't help either, but I don't know if it's just, my baseline is Steamer. I don't know if this is just Steamer slightly overrating Ivaldi. I don't know if it's slightly underrating Ray's bats. I'm willing to take my shot, and if he really is 6%, I'd be happy to have 12 and just double up on that number. But it's not something that I have this aggressively strong take on. He's not in any sort of rank system super high up on the list. He's basically in the exact same spot from a rank perspective. I'm just taking a little bit more of the ownership from the guys above him and sliding it down to him.
Makes sense. And yeah, and that's what we can gain from looking at a tool like the top pitchers tool. You immediately spot that, all right, even if we don't like him, even if all these different reasons we're talking about with liking that Rays lineup against him, first of all, you can grab some shares of the opposing offense, fortunately, in different lineups, and we can play both sides a little bit. But we're also just looking at that leverage spot where, all right, even if we don't like him, his chance of being the top pitcher on the slate is double his ownership. So it just makes sense to grab shares, and it's easy, like you said, to double up the field and not really sacrifice much of your portfolio to that spot. And yeah, he does, my baseline is Steamer as well in the background. And he projects out, like I said, I've got 5 guys ahead of him. Burns, Gaussman, Wainwright, Montas, and Anderson are ahead of him. And then it's Ivaldi, and he projects basically the same as Skubal for me. So those guys are kind of a coin toss for me.
Schedule for the rest of the night. There is something coming up. PGA Live Before Lock for the Wyndham, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Ben Raza, Eric Lindquist, breaking it all down for you. Also, check out all of Jason Roslin's videos that have been posted, all of the written content that shows up on the website, and the PGA contenders from myself and Ben, our best bets for this tournament. You don't want to miss it. If you are playing PGA and you are watching that show, you are in luck. PGA Top Golfers tool, free today. If you're watching this show, which, because I'm speaking, I assume that you are, MLB player rankings, also free. Should help you out a little bit today. Head to the website. You don't have to pay a cent. It's a good time to get there. But go watch that show, by the way. It's a good one. Let's talk a little stacks. Prior to this show starting, I would have said that the Brewers were my highest rated stack and the biggest negative leverage option, in my personal opinion, and I would have been avoiding them like the plague. Who are your top stacks for today?
Yeah, let me just make one click there. Yeah, so I wrote about the Blue Jays this afternoon. They stood out to me as just kind of going a little under-owned on both sites. Really like the spot for those guys, like the opportunity. The Brewers were standing out as being in a good spot. They're definitely getting nice home run projections in my home run model. Going up against Jake Arrieta, there's every reason in the world to attack Jake Arrieta with bats. I don't care who they're playing, even if it's a local Little League team. But in this ballpark, in this situation, it was a killer spot. But there's just so much ownership. We're talking about Christian Yelich on the FanDuel slate. Christian Yelich costs, for some reason, $3,500, and he's got 40.9% ownership projection. That's way too high for any individual hitter on any slate. So it's just a spot where, and that continues throughout this lineup. It's a bunch of guys in the mid-20s, high teens. It's just a spot where I'd rather let the field have it, particularly because this is a team that I've talked about a number of different times this year. I don't really like how this lineup is put together. I think there's too many strikeouts in it. I think there's not enough hit tool in it, not enough good guys that are good at putting the bat on the ball. So it's just been a lineup I've stayed away from for the most part for the year. So when the field is this heavy on them, I don't like going to teams that I consider below average kind of teams. So I'm just not liking the spot at all for Milwaukee. So fire up the Toronto spot for me, definitely. I think that lineup plays, at least 1 through 7. And if you want to work in Santiago Espinal, Reese McGuire around the edges to get a little bit of cost offset, a little bit of positional offset, whatever you need, that's fine. Going up against the former, it's basically Dylan Bundy's jersey, and anybody, an empty clone is sitting there wearing it. 80 2/3 innings, 21.5% strikeout rate, 4.55 xFIP, 1.36 WHIP. There's just nothing here for Dylan Bundy, and he's giving up a ton of contact, 10.3% barrel ball rate. Just not the pitcher he briefly was. He was long expected, found it for a little while, and then quickly lost it. So I don't know what we're getting from Dylan Bundy in the future, but I think we can attack him with Blue Jays here.
I legitimately love this Blue Jay stack. They are my number 2 overall and my number 1 leverage stack. That is pretty much in line with everything we're seeing on the top stack tool. Unquestionably, that's the direction that I'm looking to go most. I would be lighter on the Brewers as of right now. I would be lighter on the Cardinals, Tigers, and Orioles, teams that are standing out most to me. Blue Jays, Dodgers, Braves, Red Sox. They would be the core 4 for me if I'm looking for any sort of major stacks. If we're talking just from a FanDuel perspective, Blue Jays still there at the top. Dodgers for sure. Braves for sure. Red Sox once again still avoiding that Tigers and Orioles game, which I'm sure will come back to bite me in the bum. Anything else really standing out to you, whether that's an individual bat that really is popping for you that, might exist in an over-owned stack that you'd rather get to, or just other stacks that you think may be slipping through the cracks?
There was really nobody in that Brewers lineup. That's where I was still sitting, just trying to look for an angle on a hitter that we could maybe say, yeah, this is a good one-off. You mentioned the Dodgers in there. They're popping for me as a stack as well. I prefer it on DK. They're a little harder to get to because they're high priced, but that's pushing their ownership down a little bit. So I think that improves the spot for them. But that's another lineup that just plays for me top to bottom, good amount of power, excellent hitters throughout. I don't care that Cody Bellinger's only at 177, 273, 328 with 7 home runs and a 151 ISO on the season. I know who Cody Bellinger is, so I'm happy to get to him when he's underowned, underpriced. So for me, at under 10% ownership, 3,200 on the FanDuel slate, first base and outfield eligible. I think he's somebody worth at least calling out in that lineup, even if you're not going to Dodgers stacks. Maybe grab a little under on sneaky Cody Bellinger and just get there before the field does. I know he homered the other night, but just he is a sleeping tiger in the just general MLB DFS go forward for the next 2 months. I don't mind the idea of getting just some Phillies on the other side of your David Price call there. I think there's definitely upside. I talked about how they're maybe a little bit overrated, but I do like some of the right-handed hitters in this lineup. I do think that there's upside. No Rhys Hoskins in the lineup is obviously a big detriment, but you do get Andrew McCutchen in there. He's got a decent amount of pop. Bryce Harper can hit one out against anybody. Real Muto, the best offensive catcher in the league. If you're looking for a catcher on DK, under 10% ownership, under 4,500 for JT Real Muto in this spot. Maybe a bit of a mistake price. Gene Segura above him is perfectly fine. But, so I think there's definitely playable bats in both sides of that game. The A's, another team that we can call out being potentially underowned.
Let me take a look at where I have the A's right now. So I have the A's overall number 8. Slightly, basically like a neutral stack for me. So they would definitely be a team that I would want to get a chunk of in a 150 scenario. No problems going there. Guys that are standing out most to me, I think Yan Gomes might be going a little over-owned at 2,700, but you understand why it happens from the catcher spot. Guy that I would be looking at most would be Starling Marte, even though he is 5,700. I think that's he's more than easy to get to, especially at 3% ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great ownership spot. I do also have to say Mitch Moreland somehow is the minimum price on the DK slate and only pulling 5.3% ownership. That's a mistake in a lefty-righty spot for Mitch Moreland. We know about his lefty-righty power. It hasn't really shown through this season, 7 home runs and a 157 ISO in 211 plate appearances, but give Mitch Moreland a chance. He'll hit one out for you every now and again. Seth Brown, similar idea, 2,200, 5.2% ownership. I honestly could stack, just grab a 3-man of Moreland, Chapman, and Seth Brown and just play the low ownership on the back end at low cost. I'd be fine with doing that if you wanted to get a little bit different. But this slate, this stack isn't so highly owned that you need to get Orioles game delayed. This stack isn't so highly owned that we need to really worry about going to such low-owned hitters in combinations. And they're even lower owned on the FanDuel slate. They're a little bit of money around Starling Marte and Matt Olson, but highly affordable up and down. So I really like the A stack here on both sides.
As you mentioned, Tiger.
Good. I didn't know if you were going to jump in. I was just going to give a blurb about Cal Quantrill and why you could throw A's at him. But go ahead. Where are we going?
I was just going to mention the Tigers and Orioles game, as you mentioned, going to be delayed. And I don't get the sense that that's going to matter all that much. They'll probably get started about an hour later. That's what I'm seeing. So, Cal Quantrill.
Earlier, and definitely makes sense to keep that one in based on what I was looking at. I don't have it up in front of me, but Quantrill, I think he's attackable. We mentioned he's had some upside spots, and he's probably going to be a good pitcher at one point. But over 91 2/3, 18.3% strikeout, few too many walks at 7.8%, 1.24 WHIP. Barrels are fine. Hard hit is okay. just doesn't get enough swinging strikes, 8.9%, 24.2% CSW percentage. So just not enough strikes overall, just still kind of figuring it out, learning how to pitch. So I think he's very targetable here.
Just got a super chat from Sam Van Dam, which is a fun name. I hope that's a real name, actually. Rob Van Dam, wrestler, huge fan. Either way, the question is this. DK Cash, is tonight a good night to go to the 7,500 to 8K range at pitcher and go heavier on bats? I don't think so at all. I think you have to have one of Burns and Grossman. Obviously, Burns is a little bit tricky. Kevin Grossman, then, to me, is probably the safest top-end cash option. I think that combination works really well. And then I think you're either going to Tyler Anderson with him or Alex Manoah.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that. I think you're right that it's you need at least one of the apex guys in here. You don't want to be combining two of the lower cost guys. Even if you were to say grab like Montas and Anderson together, could they get there for you? Sure. You would need Burns to probably not play, and you would need Grossman, Wainwright, some of these other guys to completely go pop. I trust Grossman the most and that spot the most out of those guys. So he would be the immediate pivot to Burns for me. In a clean weather situation, it's Burns all day long as far as the best upside, point per dollar, and just everything about the conversation. And I think it's probably Anderson. For as much as I don't like him, I don't trust him, he's projecting out the best for me in terms of that money, 7,600 versus probably Ivaldi, who I already talked about not really liking, lower projection for 8,200 would be my next guy up. I don't think there's any value in paying all the way down to like a Will Crow, any of those guys. I mentioned Tukey earlier, don't love it. Wade Miley, don't love it going up against Atlanta. I know he's a name that's come up in a few spots. Similar with Kyle Gibson. We didn't really talk him through, but just kind of overrated start to his season already. He has never really been a very good pitcher, under a 20% strikeout rate. You'd be throwing him at that Dodgers lineup, and he's not that cheap, so I don't really see any value there.
I'm running a crunch right now, unencumbered, no randomness whatsoever. My straight projections. It's through 70 lineups right now. Corbin Burns is in all of them. Kevin Grossman is in 80%. Manoah is in 9 of 73. Tyler Anderson is in 4 of 74. I would not be using anyone else in a cash game scenario other than the 4 names I see there. Burns is weather status right now is enough to concern me to maybe not go to the Burns-Grossman pairing immediately. So I think Grossman-Manoah or Grossman-Anderson would be my preferred combination from a cash game perspective.
Makes sense. And yeah, plenty of upside for Manoah. Of course, we didn't really dig into him too much, I don't think, but 52 and a third innings, 28.2% strikeout rate, induces plenty of swinging, 12.9% right there. A little bit, he has struggled anyway on some of the contact stuff, but he's got it under control right now, 7.7% barrel ball rate overall, maybe a tick high, but 36.2% hard hit, 87.7 mile an hour average exit velo. The trajectory's up. He allows fly balls, allows guys to elevate. So you worry when he goes into a Shohei Ohtani at bat, a Justin Upton at bat, maybe even a Joe Adell at bat. But there are massive strikeouts in that Angels lineup. Adam talked about it a little bit too. With adding Brendan Marsh and Joe Adell in there, you just get major strikeout guys. Adell has power for days. He's a premium prospect in terms of the power bat, but he really struggled when he came up last year and struggles pretty mightily right now. No home runs over 29 plate appearances, striking out 27.6% of the time, Marsh at 36.4%. Even Ohtani, one of the best hitters for power in the league overall, 30.7% strikeout rate. Does draw walks 12.2% of the time, but 266, 360, 649 hitter. So Ohtani's really all about the power. His hit tool's okay. He strikes out a ton. He walks a lot, which is good. That's what you want from him. He barrels the ball like crazy, 24.4% of the time. That's insane. But I mean, as far as the hit tool and not striking out, that's not what he specializes in. So could Manoah get through him cleanly twice and then maybe give up a solo shot? Absolutely.
Finishing off a couple picks here, keeping the typing going. Ooh, I like it. I like it a lot. Anything else you want to touch on from a stacks or hitting perspective?
Let's just see what's coming up. I'm just running, I've got about 400 lineups crunched in Cruncher, mostly running 4-3-1s today, just trying to get to, now that I have cracked the code on how to set a good group of one-offs on Fantasy Cruncher. I've been doing that a little bit with some dedicated low-owned guys as my one-offs, where I'm trying to get different from the field with that. Looks like I'm coming up with, at the top of Cruncher, which will end up getting sorted out through process, Detroit and Milwaukee coming up a lot naturally based on pricing, based on projections where they're at. But out of teams I'm actually interested in, getting to a good amount of Boston, ton of Toronto, good amount of the Dodgers, good amount of St. Louis. I like all their right-handed power. Wrote them up yesterday. I like the spot for them again here today. Atlanta coming up pretty big. And then there's a little bit of separation before I get to teams like Cleveland, Tampa Bay. I'm hoping that the process carries Cincinnati and Oakland, both of which I talked about, into more shares than I'm getting for where it seems like they are in Cruncher. Hopefully the few shares that I have here will get elevated through my process. I think they will. Otherwise, I'm going to have to force some in. I actually might give them some thumbs up on this last 100. Usually I drop like 500 lineups into the sorting filter for baseball.
Gotcha. If you guys weren't aware, you can sign up at awesemo.com using the promo code MLB live before lock. That is one gigantic word, as long as you could possibly imagine, honestly. 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus, and it doesn't just cover baseball. It covers everything we've got. NFL, MLB, PGA, NASCAR, MMA, tennis, soccer, esports. So many different things, but it's really easy to read off the header bar of the website. It's just simply in order for me, and that makes it a lot easier. Projections, ownership, depending on the sport. We got like top stacks, we've got top pitchers, we've got top golfers, top fighters tool for MMA. It's really good stuff. I rely on so much of the data that is on the website. You guys should too. Use that promo code MLB live before lock. Again, one gigantic word for you. I assume it's up on the screen or was up on the screen from the producer behind the virtual glass, Jordan Klein. Oh, here we go. Big super chat coming in from one Peter Hanley. How do you do the one-offs? That's a very interesting question coming from a man that may be up $250,000 or more over the past 2 months playing DFS. So
no wonder we got the generous little super chat there. Thank you very much, Peter. We appreciate that. So it's something that it was my number one wish list item for Fantasy Cruncher for a long time, was being able to say, all right, I want this pool of guys and only this pool of guys to be the possible one-offs, right? And it was something that I struggled with trying to, drop in a different data differentiator that I could use my data to flag. And there were no good ways to do it. You could set certain single player crunches or single player stacks rather, and you would be able to dictate what teams they came from. But now they've put in the ability where you can dictate which lineup spots or which positions from each one of those teams in greater depth come up. So what you want to do, you just need to set a single player stack, just like you would to create a 4-player, 3-player stack. So the first one you build is a single player. Uncheck all of the lineup spots at the top, at the very top before all the teams. Uncheck all of the batting order spots, and they'll go down team by team and just check off, all right, I want the 3, 4, and 5 hitters available as one-offs from the Blue Jays. Click those guys, leave everybody else blank. Once you fill out all the teams, assuming you've got all your percentages and everything set up with enough room to crunch, you should only get the guys that are in that single man stack as your one-off population. And then you, of course, build your 4-3, your 3-3-2, whatever you want to do. So neat little thing that we figured out the other day in Slack. Good reason to jump into premium Slack if you guys aren't in there. If you're subscribers, if you're not subscribers, good reason to subscribe at the website. Jump into premium Slack. We're talking about stuff like this and figuring stuff out all day long.
Another great benefit to signing up with the promo code MLB live before lock. And apparently I was muted when we started this show. We are only at 191 likes. I guess you guys didn't hear me. That number should be north of 200, but now we're setting the goal a little bit higher. We just gave you the goods. Terry's bringing in the FC tips for single one-offs to Peter Hanley, a guy who's getting a new screenshot posted in the Awesemo Hall of Fame on what seems like a daily basis. We might as well just change the Twitter handle to his personal Twitter handle at this point. So let's run those likes up a little bit. That was a good little nugget. And now we are at the time where we're going to go position by position and give our personal faves for today's slate. Let's start at the catcher spot, which is wildly uninteresting on FanDuel.
Indeed it is. Sure. My favorite catcher. This is my least favorite way to talk about baseball as well. So I mentioned him before.
Agreed.
I think my favorite catcher on the slate might be JT Realmuto. I just think the price was down a little bit on him, and he's best offensive catcher in baseball. So how can you go wrong?
Highest ranked catcher that I have is Omar Narvaez, but I do find him individually to be over-owned. So make sure you're aware of the rest of your lineup structure. If he's a one-off for you in a lower-owned stack, I don't have a problem with it. But if you're just forcing him into another high-owned stack, that would not be the direction I'm looking to go. If you want someone, the most under-owned guy for me right now is Buster Posey, 4,100. Projected for 4% ownership. I've got him at 7. That is where I would land if I were trying to name any catchers. Now we could talk about legitimate positions that exist on both sites. Let's talk first baseman. Who is your favorite first baseman today?
So let's see. A good way to do this might be to jump into my home run model, and that has Paul Goldschmidt just narrowly edging out Vlad Guerrero. Now, I mentioned the Toronto Blue Jays as a favorite stack of mine, so the answer is probably Vlad, but I'll go with the home run model's answer. A little bit of Paul Goldschmidt there. I really like both of those teams, so I'll be getting to both of those guys in spades.
Vlad Guerrero Jr. pretty clearly at the top of my list and not even particularly close in terms of ownership. He is my unquestioned number one guy. Lamont Wade, actually, my number 2. A little nervous about the Escobar and Tellez ownership, but just as I said for Narvaez, I don't mind using those guys. You just have to be a little bit more cognizant of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Vlad Guerrero, though, man, that dude is legit.
Oh my God. Legit shot at the Triple Crown. He's fallen a little bit behind in batting averages at like 314. I think the leader's in the high 320s, but he is right there at the Triple Crown. And I mean, that's an accomplishment in this sport, in the way that the game's played these days. He is just unreal. For all his hitting acumen, also only strikes out 17.4% of the time, walks 12.8% of the time, 54.4% hard hit rate, 15.9% barrel ball rate. The kid's a monster. He's amazing. I saw his father play, and he is every bit the hitter his dad was, and probably a lot more disciplined and probably a better hitter in the long run. So we'll see with where the power lands. But as far as a pure hitter, I think the kid is probably a better pure hitter than the father was. And that's
Can you imagine?
Father's in the Hall of Fame.
Craig Arrowwood with the question here. Which father-son combo is better all time, Griffey's or Guerrero's? I mean, it's Griffey now. It can very easily be Guerrero.
That one's going to need some time, but yeah, that's going to be a pretty damn close call if nothing else.
Yeah, Vlad's going to need quite a few more years to become the proper junior in this scenario, because I mean, he was unquestionably my favorite baseball player growing up, as I think like most kids felt. He was cool. He was wearing backwards hats. He hit bombs. He was an incredible athletic center fielder. I can still remember vividly watching the highlight of him breaking his wrist on the wall, which sucked. Griffey was everything to me back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was baseball's Michael Jordan back in the 90s. Yeah. He was the transitional player. He was the guy that brought the game from the 80s into the 90s, and the more modern game, brought a little bit of, like you were saying, flair and attitude and all of that to it. Made it our game instead of our dad's game, to put it in a weird kind of a context. But he was sort
of like the Fab Five of baseball. Like he had the different look. It was a very more modern feel. I know I'm using words that probably make me sound like a total asshole, but like that was the same thing. You get Jalen and Weber and everything coming in with the long baggy shorts. I know I loved it. I snatched that look up immediately. It was just for me, man. That was what it was. And Griffey was the same sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely.
And then Dion for football.
Michigan starter jackets were popular in New Jersey, right? It's like,
it was certainly popular while I wore it in Pennsylvania. That's for sure.
There you go. Exactly.
To second base we go. Top of my list, I'll lead off on this one. Colton Wong and Ozzie Albies are my 2 favorite second basemen, and they are wildly different when it comes to ownership. Wong, well north of 20%. Ozzie Albies, below 10%. So again, context is important here, but I see those guys as relative equals. Ozzie Albies would be my favorite second baseman if you're trying to be a little bit different, but even if you're not, he looks fantastic.
Yeah, I'll take Ozzie Albies on almost any slate against any pitcher. Certainly here against Wade Miley. Guy hits from both sides of the plate and does it well. Power and speed, 18 home runs, 13 stolen bases on the year. I can definitely back you on that one. I'm going to take the guy on the other side of that game, actually, Mike Moustakas, who is first and third base on DK, but he's second and third base on FanDuel. So I'm going to let myself have him. He was also my home run pick on the day, so I got to take Moose here.
Always love a nice Moose Tacos pick. I would give anything to eat Moose Tacos tonight for dinner, but that is not what I have.
I feel like Moose might be a little bit gamey. I don't know that is Moose a burger kind of meat? I don't know if I've ever had a Moose burger. There's a good joint over here that does like exotic meats. They've got like yak burger and ostrich burgers, alligator sausages. Really good. Interesting stuff.
Wife and I, last time we were in Savannah, probably like 6 months ago or so, I went to a place called Alligator Soul. They always have some sort of exotic meat on the menu, along with some other weirder stuff. But we had I'm not even going to remember it right now. Some sort of alligator dish that was phenomenal. And then some sort of random like moose type animal as a red meat, which I could have, like, it was fine. A little stringier than I would have liked it to be. But the alligator, in fact, outstanding.
Yeah. It's like really, really good sausage. At least when anytime I've had it, it's usually like done up like Cajun-y and like just,
they had really chorizo in it, which was really good. Now I just want it. Rock Latex says ostrich is the best red meat. I'd be interested in ostrich because if I remember correctly, those animals are assholes.
I think they do have that reputation. Yeah. They're assholes. But then when you go with them, they just stick their head in the ground or anything, like most assholes do.
Yeah, it's like Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Third base today. Who is your favorite third base option?
Let's pop back over to the old home run model here. Well, I could throw Moose back at you. I am getting him at the top of the board for DK at third base. Let's see here, though. Give you a little bit more of an honest answer. Oh, that's why, because I don't have all the third baseman flagged. How about going back to the St. Louis side of things, since I called out Paul Goldschmidt on the other side of the diamond, getting Nolan Arenado popping right up there with him in terms of my home run model. So I get a decent little pop there. And then a little bit more of an oddball one, maybe Michael Franco from the Orioles. I think he's in the lineup. Getting a decent home run mark on him as well.
All righty. For third base for me, I was on the wrong page there for a second. Vlad on FanDuel works pretty nicely. Nolan Arenado and my boy Candelario are my two top-ranked third basemen on DraftKings, but again, pulling a little bit of ownership. Austin Riley, the guy that's not pulling all that much, the guy that I'd be willing to get to. 5K price tag is probably the reason why that's happening. That is a healthy number, but no problem with it. My number 3 overall.
Yeah, he's earned it this year. I mean, he's maybe gone under the radar for a lot of the season, and he's a kid that they were waiting on for a long time there and has really started to deliver completely in full. We saw flashes of it over the last 2 seasons, but this year, 290, 367, 515, 225 ISO, 23 home runs, 33% better than average creating runs. Kid's a killer. Love the spot.
Got to talk a little bit right now about the sponsor of this show. That would be Jock Market, and they have turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange, and you don't have to wait until the end of the game to make any money. You can buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money throughout the entire game. You can sit on your couch and buy and sell guys, and it's really, really fun. I love this mechanism for DFS. I love the ability to try to buy your way out of mistakes that you may have made or buy into things that you may have missed. If you can be fast enough on the trigger, whether it's NBA, MLB, NHL, or PGA, you can do that. You pick up everybody in their pregame IPO. That's where you start it all off. And then you buy, sell, or hold until the end of the game. You get paid out based on the shares of where they rank with their fantasy points. You can download the app in the App Store to get started. Use the promo code Awesemo for a $50 bonus on that first deposit. That offer exclusive to the Awesemo community. You should take advantage of it right now. Again, Awesemo, AWES. EMO is the promo code. Got to make sure you spell it right. I know how much you guys don't like spelling it right when you yell at me on Twitter, but you want to spell it right here and get that $50 bonus at Jock Market. Love having them as the presenting sponsor of this show. This Linda Carly person is really not happy with the direction we've taken the show. So I might run this bad boy directly into the ground for the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, they don't know how much we could just spend talking about food the rest of this time.
Yeah. I had Eric taking hot tub time machines yesterday for 10 minutes. I mean, I can spiral this one if I need to. Trust me, I could spiral it like the best of them. You're lucky this show isn't me and Spags, or this one would have been over before it started.
And we've covered a ton of ground. We've got 15 minutes to spare still to talk about anything anybody's wondering. If you've got those complaints, if we're not talking about what you want, throw a question at us, guys. We're sitting here.
We hit top stacks. We hit top pitchers. We're working our way through positions. We've got 2 to go, and then we're opening this bad boy up to the questions. But at shortstop, top of the heap for me, and under-owned as far as I'm concerned, newly minted Dodger Trey Turner.
That's a definite good one. Let me get to the shortstops here. I think I selected them all. The multi-position really screws me up when I'm selecting these guys. Let's see. Going not to keep harping on the Cardinals, but another guy in that team with a good home run mark in my model, Paul DeJong, guy who's been underrated all season long. Believe he's still below the Mendoza line. That's on the other tab, but a good amount of home runs and a guy who's a proven home run hitter over time. So I like getting to Paul DeJong when the rest of the field isn't. That said, if I'm picking an absolute favorite on this slate, it's kind of difficult to ignore Bo Bichette there. Love the Blue Jays. We talked about them. And then I could argue for Xander Bogaerts or Corey Seager as well on the other side of that Dodgers shortstop situation.
Bo Bichette and JP Crawford showing up as the guys that I think are most under-owned for today. Paul DeJong, pretty low on my list right now, pulling a lot of ownership. That is going to be one that I would probably be trying to avoid. It almost makes me feel like I've got a mistake. It's that bad.
Let's see. Yeah, 13-3 at 3,200 on the DK slate. A little lower, under 10%, 2,600 on the FanDuel slate. So I like them a little bit better there.
Yeah, same. Very different play on FanDuel than it is on DraftKings. Let's close it out with outfield, where there are 77 options by my count that you could roster playing outfield on DraftKings. Who are your favorite outfielders for today? I've got one that stands out pretty dramatically in a sea of guys that I think are a bit overowned.
So let's see. It looks like I have to click 77 different places to pull all those guys up with all the multi-positions. Let's see. Here's an interesting guy from a team we haven't talked all that much about. I get a good home run mark on Trey Mancini from the Orioles. I know we touched on the Orioles briefly, but actually it looks like a couple of them are popping up in a decent amount here in the home run model. And it's basically following around, I'll give you the teams. It's Tyler O'Neill from St. Louis. It's coming up with the Baltimore outfield. It's coming up with the Cincinnati outfield. And then one guy who pops to the top of the board a lot, Shohei Ohtani.
George Springer at the top of my list. Yelich, Grossman, Tyler O'Neill, all at the top, but I think are going a bit more owned than I would like in an individual basis, depending on my lineup construction. But I got a bunch that are going under owned. Lamont Wade, Corey Dickerson, JD Martinez, Austin Meadows, Mitch Haniger, Jesse Winker, Ohtani, Harper, Grichuk, all these guys pulling like 1-2% ownership. Happy to take those kinds of guys as flyers in my lineups. That is every position now. We have touched on every single position. So now we get into a part of the show that's going to be great for you and I, because we both have this. Who is your home run pick of the day? Who are you taking out of your model for tonight?
My home run pick of the day was in my column. It was Mr. Mike Moustakas from the Cincinnati Reds. I really like Moose in this spot. Get him on the left side of the plate in that matchup, and he's just popping up near the top of my home run model and the overall in terms of getting every position in there. I'm trying to just sort it as I'm talking through here so I can give everybody the exact ranking, since I did mention a lot of different people. Moose is sitting number 2 overall, one spot behind Tyler O'Neill, who I just talked about, one spot ahead of Trey Mancini, who I just talked about. Love the spot for Moose, get an infielder. He was lower owned earlier in the day, not all that expensive, just coming back from his injury.
I have Moustakas at 24, although the separation between 5th and 24 is pretty minor. My top 4 have separated from the rest of the pack. Vlad Guerrero at the top of the heap, Matt Olson 2, Ohtani 3, George Springer number 4. Would happily take any one of those guys, but it feels a bit like cheating, and I want a more fun answer. So my pick for a dong today will be, and I need someone relatively low owned. I don't want to get too crazy. Let's go with, you know what? Let's too owned. Let's go here. Doesn't seem like a great spot, but ranks high enough, and no one is rostering him today on DraftKings. I will take Franmil Reyes, coming in number 13 in my model for today. That one works for me.
Franmil always pops for me. Magic number being 10 in my model to give you an above average chance. He's at a 12.44. Compares favorably with the top guys. O'Neill, I mentioned at the top, is at a 17.96. Overall, Franmil number 17 on my board. I think everybody that you mentioned is in the top 20, 25 on my board. So yeah, we're in lockstep on a lot of those guys.
Perfect. 6:54 and change p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you're starting to get those lineups in. We got about 10 minutes to go until lock, so we're opening it up. Premium Slack. If you got your questions, get them in now. YouTube chat. Everyone but Linda. I will happily answer your questions. I got one that we got tagged in a couple minutes ago. I want to hit on it. Top 2 pitchers on DraftKings, excluding Burns.
Excluding Burns. Okay. That's for me. My model bases on FanDuel projection, but it's relatively similar. I would go Kevin Gausman, and then I think there's just enough safety for me in just going to Adam Wainwright and taking him against the Pirates if we're not that worried about the $9,900 and $9,400 costs going together. That said, I think $9,400 is probably a little too much to pay for Waino when you can get Frankie Montas at 87, or you can go down to Alek Manoah at 91, maybe pick up a little bit of additional strikeout upside with Manoah. So I don't mind any one of those guys in that second spot, but it would be Gausman with a bullet for number one for the SP1 spot in that situation.
Gausman Manoah would be my preferred combo. That would be the combo that would show up the most for me if I were getting to anything.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. What's the ownership difference between Waino and Manoah on the DK slate as of last update? I'm just 26.
Manoah 26%, Wainwright 14 was what I had last. I haven't pulled anything since then, but I assume it's somewhere in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, it's not going to have changed all that dramatically for those two guys. So I think a little bit of that too would probably push me a little bit more toward Waino. There's just nothing at all to be scared of in that Pittsburgh lineup. And I think he's at least competent enough, 22.8% strikeout rate, a little below average, 139 and 2/3 innings over 22 starts. So he's giving us depth going up against one of the least productive lineups in the league, capable of finding a few additional strikeouts. And there are a few additional strikeouts baked into the back end of this lineup now with Anthony Alford in there. So I think he's at least capable, and given the ownership differential for a similar price as Manoah, I think I'll lean on that. I'll make that since I kind of wavered there, I would go Gausman and Waino.
We got a question coming in from Cream in Premium Slack. Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt?
Pretty much 6 of one, half dozen of another. Arenado edges out Goldie in my home run model. They're owned basically the same on FanDuel. On DK, Goldie's owned a lot less and $300 less expensive, so I would lean that way on DraftKings. Kind of a pick 'em for me on FanDuel. Depends on what position you need.
Yeah. Speaking of pick 'em here, Paul Goldschmidt, I have projected for 12 fantasy points on FanDuel, shows up in optimals 9% of the time. Nolan Arenado projected for 11.9 fantasy points, shows up in optimals 9% of the time. That is a literal coin flip. I don't have any further that basically have the exact same ownership. Play two lineups would be my recommendation. I cannot pick between those two things. They are the same to me.
And I mean, if we're building the ideal Cardinals stack, if we're not just talking about them in terms of a one-off, the answer is probably put them both into it, in my opinion anyway. I mean, those are their two best hitters. You typically want to be getting to those guys when they're in the lineup.
Let's see what else we've got coming in right now. Trying to take a look at chat. What do y'all think about Bundy going up against mostly righties, and is best pitch upside in the last 5 games versus Toronto? For me, Bundy, not someone that I'm super interested in. He would be like a 10th, 11th priority on DraftKings and not a priority whatsoever on FanDuel.
Yeah, it would be a DK only play if I was going to make it, and I don't think I would even make it over there. So just not interesting to me. Was a guy I was kind of giving some shots earlier in the year because I thought he was going to be better than he's been, but he's definitely proven to me that he's not that quality, so I don't really see a need to go to him. It's more a spot I'm looking to attack with bats, to be honest.
I think I got a pretty fun junkyard dog finally showed up here. He's either smoking a joint or a cigarette. No, NFT. I'm really hoping that's a joint. I'll dig into that a little bit later in 7 minutes when this show is over. I know nobody cares at all.
You get any of those Topps Bundesliga? Speaking of throwing away money?
Did I get any what?
You know, the Topps Bundesliga. You're a soccer guy. I know you're more a Premiership guy or whatever, but Bundesliga is a soccer league, right? Oh, see,
yes, it is. It is. It is the German.
That's
soccer
how much
league.
I know. Yeah.
No, I didn't.
What a bunch of their cards. Know nothing about it. Right.
I did not get anything.
Yeah, you and a lot of people seem to have skipped that one.
I didn't know it existed. If it helps.
I think that was probably part of the problem, that a lot of people didn't seem to know it existed. I think there's still packs up there if you want them.
Oh, really?
Probably. They were not moving fast.
I mean, I would be interested. I didn't know that it was a thing. I'm too busy buying, let's see, Junkyard Dogs, Hammered Dragons, Lucha Libre guys, Glue Factory horses, Party Penguins. It's been an experience since I got back from vacay.
Clearly, you've changed your once strongly held opinions about NFTs, I see.
Well, to me, the NBA Top Shot NFTs, the problem is that you don't actually get anything from the clip. I always thought that having the ability to monetize your purchase would be interesting. These are, digital artwork that I think will be fun to display in my home or to flip immediately for money, which has been very successful so far. Renfroe or Kiki?
For me, that's always Renfroe. I know Kiki's had a decent season. He pops a little bit here and there in my home run model, but just overall in terms of quality hitter, quality power hitter, it's Renfroe all day.
Let's see what else we got. How many Penguins do I got? 3. Sold one yesterday and paid off everything else that I purchased in terms of Penguins.
Sweet.
Breaking that scrizzle off. Fleming in Boston with wind blowing out.
No, not a spot for me. Was he somebody that you were getting to on DK at all? I just kind of didn't really look at him because he wasn't in play on FanDuel, really. Is he somebody that you were considering? Yeah. Yeah. And I just don't like attacking that Red Sox lineup. If the question's ever just, are you throwing random mediocre pitcher X at excellent lineup Y? My answer is usually going to be no.
10 more likes to hit 250. We should definitely do that. 5 more minutes to go. Well, 4 minutes and 10 seconds. You should definitely go ahead and get those lineups in. Last thing you want to do is be left without the proper lineups. And I hope at the very least, your dummy lineup has no one starting in the 705 games.
Always a good plan. Always good to make that your strategy for going in. And then it's always good to have a plan. And I say this more than I follow it. It's a kind of a, do as I say, not as I do situation, but it's always good to make a plan for some of these pivots and some of these. All right, that early game just scrapped. We've got to make the 7-10. I've got 5 minutes after lock and I've got to get these guys out. That situation cropped up the other day with, I had taken the Mets out, but I had some Pete Alonso one-offs that I'd completely forgotten about. So I had to scramble with 5 minutes there. And if you at least know and have a process for, all right, this is how I get my lineup CSV, this is where I drop it in. These are the 3 things I need to do within Cruncher to get it to give me that opportunity to make some of those changes. If you've practiced it, if you've done it a few times and have a plan, it at least goes smoother in those disaster moments. So maybe you stand a chance of getting those changes done. It's always a good idea.
Breaking news right now, Kyle Gibson scratched Connor Brogdon starting for Gibson. So if you have Kyle Gibson in a lineup, you might want to get him out immediately.
That's the kind of thing that you should have planned for, like I was saying. Nice transition. You should cut me off next time I'm rambling and you've got news like that.
I mean, Kyle Gibson is pulling precisely no ownership, so it wasn't exactly a priority. If Kyle Gibson was projected for like 9-10% ownership, I would have cut you off. But when I looked, I saw 0.9 and 1% on FanDuel and immediately just stopped caring.
Across 500 lineups on FanDuel, I got 0 shares of them. I'm pretty sure I actually had them unclicked in Fantasy Cruncher, but just had to check that. Yeah,
Ken Simmons, Riley or Freeman in an Atlanta stack on FanDuel?
I mean, you're talking about pretty different classes of hitters there in terms of over the course of their careers, what Freddie Freeman does overall with the hit tool. It's close. It depends positionally and cost-wise. I'm just pulling it up now so I can look at the cost difference.
300.
Yeah, I mean, if the 300 gets you to something interesting, you can make the pivot. You're also, if you pay up to Freddie, you're getting him at less ownership than you're getting Riley. It's a both sides one for me, different positions, different costs. So if you gain from making one play or the other, go for it. I'm fine with both.
Right now, I have Freeman by a half fantasy point, but you're also paying an extra $300. I have Austin Riley showing up in an optimal at 9%, Freeman 7%. No ownership coming to Freeman. So that is a little bit interesting too, depending on what the rest of your lineup looks like.
Yeah, if you can just tell me, hey, which one of these 2 guys would you rather have with not much ownership? Don't worry about the cost or anything. It's probably going to be Freddie Freeman. Just in the course of if neither one's going to hit a home run, who's probably going to be more productive for me? It's probably going to be Freddie Freeman.
Another question we had from Mr. Moneybags. Can you rank your top 5 Blue Jays for a DK GPP? Vlad, Springer, Semien, Bichette, Corey Dickerson.
Yeah, I mean, it's 1 through 7 in basically any combination. I think you do need to get to Dickerson or Grichuk in there to offset a little bit of the ownership. Not that they're that heavy, but at least you're doing something a little different than just going 1 through 5. Ownership and total DFS vacuum, it's 1 through 5 for me. Those are the 5 best hitters in that lineup.
Yep, absolutely. Only reason I dropped down a little bit, I had Dickerson at 8%, Teoscar at 7%, and you save an additional $1,600. So to me, you can't really go wrong. I like the entire team, 1 through 9. I would happily get a lot of any sort of machinations of them all, but those 5 were the 5 that I would prefer.
Yeah, for sure. And there is a big price differential if you're playing it on FanDuel between going to Teoscar at 34 and Corey Dickerson at the flat minimum at 2,000.
I would be looking
in like
at
a week. What are they doing? I don't understand why he's still priced at the minimum.
Yeah, Corey Dickerson would be one guy involved for me. Vlad, Semien, and Springer. Semien has to be in there as far as I'm concerned. 3,900, second short eligibility, and significantly less ownership than the rest of this lineup.
Yeah,
but that's it, man. We
Ridiculously
are
advantageous by the. Hey, there we go. Just to finish that thought, ridiculously advantageous that you can cover the entire infield with two players between Vlad Guerrero and Marcus Semien on FanDuel, first and third and second and short. Love that flexibility. Anyway,
makes
we're
it
locked.
super easy. We locked. That's it. It's good times. We got up over 250 likes. I'd love to see it. Terry, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
My tournament strategy article's free on the site every day. I cover a lot of this stuff we talk about. Check that out. Check out everything we got going on. Subscribe. Hit our fantasy football kit. Everybody's got drafts coming up. That thing's going to make you different than the other people who are all just using the consensus ADP from some of the common sites.
That'll do it. Make sure you're watching the PGA Live Before Lock show at 7:30. Go, eat a little something, get yourself a drink, and then come back, watch that show. Ben and Eric breaking it all down for the Wyndham. Good luck tonight, everybody. One last time, hit that like button on your way out the door. We'll be back again tomorrow with a ton of baseball content. We'll see you then.